Chapter 1087. I have to go too. Poplar Fruit asked in surprise. Thinking of the reason, Poplar Fruit smiled bitterly and said, Director Yang, I don't think it's necessary. Actually, to be able to catch the mastermind, it was all due to the efforts of the police. I don't want to be in the limelight. What do you mean you don't want to be there? You have to be there. Yang Wanxiong sighed and said, It's our Tsayun police who didn't do our job well. We misunderstood you last night. But Poplar Fruit, you have to do something. This press conference needs you. Or else, we won't be able to answer to the people. It turned out that the Kunming police force was being condemned by the people all over the country. When they woke up in the morning, besides being shocked by the horrible incident at Kunming train station, they also found out about the hero Poplar Fruit. This hero was rumored to have been killed by the police. If it wasn't for him, we would all be dead. How could we have waited for the police to come? A traveler who had personally experienced the tragic escape said in an interview with the media. From the point of view of different travelers, people could see the sudden and dangerous outbreak of the incident. Some travelers even said that they had been sitting next to the thugs, and that there was only a thin line between life and death. If it wasn't for Yang Guo descending from the heavens like Superman or Spider-Man in the movies, defeating the thugs one by one with his bare hands, the number of casualties in this incident would have probably doubled. Because there wasn't any news about Poplar Fruit, and even the Kunming government's response to the Poplar Fruit incident was very slow, they didn't introduce the situation of Poplar Fruit at the first press conference in the morning. At that time, Poplar Fruit hadn't woken up yet. So, people started to be angry. No one knew who instigated it. Maybe it was because of the deep resentment of the people, but the Kunming police force became the target of condemnation. Even the CCTV morning news had a few questions about the Kunming police force. One of them asked why there was no news about Poplar Fruit. The earliest response came from the official Weibo of the Kunming Police Department. It was already past 11 p.m. They said that they had found Poplar Fruit and were currently assisting in the investigation. This short message couldn't satisfy people's thirst at all. Moreover, it was vague and didn't give a satisfactory answer even until noon. At that time, there were already netizens who guessed that Poplar Fruit had already met with a tragic end, and the Kunming police were only delaying the news and not reporting it. This conjecture was not without reason. After the gunshot, Poplar Fruit was indeed dragged out by the police like a corpse. Poplar Fruit's situation affected everyone's heart. Not to mention his family and friends, Song Jiwen had forgotten to inform the school, causing Higoshiyama University and even the Ministry of Education to make things difficult for the Ministry of Public Security. They demanded a thorough investigation of Poplar Fruit's whereabouts and encounter. The cultural world, including teacher Mo Yang and other writers, asked about Poplar Fruit's whereabouts on Weibo and other public platforms. Some of Poplar Fruit's close friends in the entertainment industry also paid close attention to the progress of the matter. Poplar Fruit had already dominated Weibo. People lit candles to pray for Poplar Fruit and the innocent people who were injured or killed in the incident. Tengzun News specially made a special topic for this incident, and Poplar Fruit used thousands of words and more than 50 pictures to report it. Who is Poplar Fruit? This was a question about Poplar Fruit's report. It was asked to the readers, but everyone could find the answer in it. Tengzun News could be said to have the most right to speak about Poplar Fruit's report. Ever since Poplar Fruit emerged, Tengzun News had been accompanying and reporting on him. Now, very few people might remember that Poplar Fruit, who appeared in front of everyone because of the biography of Steve Jobs, was young, but also confident and strong. He could calmly and generously speak at the press conference, answer Professor Luo Lin's test fluently, and even translate Steve Jobs' letter to his wife in front of everyone's eyes. His beautiful and impeccable words were just like his handsomeness, making people who understood and did not understand intoxicated. However, Poplar Fruit did not continue to be exposed to the spotlight. Just like his usual style, he kept a low profile and worked very hard. What did Poplar Fruit do in the year when the media did not pay attention to him? He translated Mo Yang's novel, allowing Mo Yang's literary talent to bloom in the selection of the Nobel Prize. He also translated The Fantasy of the Young School. His translation skills were so good that even a famous director like Lee had to lower his status to negotiate with him. He entered Higoshiyama University to further his studies, but before he entered the university, he had already published a thesis that opened a new level of translation theory. He learned as many as 14 languages, and this number had long become a thing of the past. Because of a trip, he came to a remote and poor Hong village. He used his own money to equip the children with modern machines so that they could see the outside world and touch their own futures. He also single-handedly created remote volunteer teaching, which made teaching easier and made university students more enthusiastic about participating in public welfare. Oh, by the way, Poplar Fruit also did a lot of things. For example, he and his girlfriend designed Hearthstone, which was currently popular all over the world. Also, he and his daughter made a guest appearance and invested in Unexpectedly, which had now become a major symbol of new online media. Poplar Fruit once again entered the media's field of vision because of his fun at Ba Fashion Week. However, this time, he became the focus of attention all over the world. Poplar Fruit succeeded. He even changed the European and American fashion industry's perception of Chinese models. However, just when everyone thought that Poplar Fruit was a model and should be a model, he used his actions to tell the world that his real job was as a translator, a teacher, and an academic researcher. The translations of the works of 2 consecutive winners of the Nobel Prize in Literature were handed over to him. In a year, the translation results had created a value of billions of dollars. He had personally pushed Chinese online literature to the top 100 bestsellers in the world and started a craze for Chinese online literature all over the world. Such achievements were so dazzling that no one could pretend not to see them. Who dared to say that Poplar Fruit was not a translator? Even adding the word home to acknowledge his greatness was not an exaggeration, right? As for being a teacher, let's not talk about being a teacher in a narrow sense. Poplar Fruit was still a student and was only an assistant. Although he had been teaching university courses for more than a year, Poplar Fruit had not reached the level of a professor, so this did not count. However, what if his contribution to remote teaching was included? Poplar Fruit's remote teaching had benefited more than 6,000 students from poor mountainous areas in Liang City. He also taught English classes from grade 1 to grade 6. The quality of his videos made all the primary school teachers feel ashamed of their inferiority. In this way, it was reasonable for more than 6,000 students from poor mountainous areas to address Poplar Fruit as a teacher. Therefore, Poplar Fruit was a teacher in a broad sense. In a narrow sense, he would definitely be an excellent professor in the future. Chapter 1088. Needless to say, the academic side was even more so. Previously, the academic community had already exposed most of Poplar Fruit's secrets. The latest research on word splitting was known as a subversive theoretical discovery in Chinese education. Teng Zun's news with pictures and text allowed everyone to once again recognize Poplar Fruit and the greatness of Poplar Fruit. Perhaps, if Yang Guo's achievements were placed in the historical record, it would be somewhat lacking. However, if one were to take Yang Guo's age into account, which was only 25 or 26 years old, it was enough for him to look down on the majority of his peers. Including in the world, there were very few young people as talented and creative as Poplar Fruit. There were actually many geniuses, but there were not many who were as low-key and focused as Poplar Fruit. Looking at the historical illusions at home and abroad, how many geniuses fell in the pursuit of pleasure after becoming famous? However, Poplar Fruit did not. He did not lose himself in the pursuit of the media. Instead, he maintained a low-key attitude and did his own academic and public welfare work. If Poplar Fruit was still alive, China would steadily gain an academic master with unlimited potential in the future. That was the evaluation of Poplar Fruit by a professor at Capital University. He served as an expert judge at Poplar Fruit's press conference last year. People would be shocked by Poplar Fruit's achievements. They would be moved by Poplar Fruit's love for his daughter and girlfriend. They would also be surprised by the superb skills that Poplar Fruit suddenly showed. They would respect Poplar Fruit because he risked his own safety to save thousands of tourists. They would also be angrier because of the injustice that Poplar Fruit might have suffered. In fact, This matter was no longer China's own business. Foreign media also gave the headlines to Kunming, who had such a big incident. For the time being, regardless of the controversy that some countries showed on the definition of a terrorist attack, the leaders of many countries stood up and condemned the bloody attack. The United Nations, including Secretary-General Mr. Pan, condemned the terrorist attack on civilians in the strongest manner. Of course, there were also condolences and sympathy, but more importantly, they called for the terrorists to be brought to justice, and for the whole world to pay attention to such cruel terrorist act. On this issue, the entire world was on the same side. The wave caused by poplar fruit was a step slower. However, the popularity of the surveillance video, the number of views on YouTube exceeded 100 million that day, was enough for people all over the world to recognize the power of poplar fruit. Some media even praised poplar fruit by using well-known kung fu stars such as Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan, and Jet Li. Was this the magical Chinese kung fu? Poplar fruit was like Bruce Lee in Fierce Dragon Crossing the River, Jackie Chan in Rush Hour, and Jet Li in The Expendables. Wasn't that the case? Even when faced with an enemy who had the advantage in numbers, he still dared to charge in and out, killing the enemy until not a single armor was left. However, poplar fruit was once a celebrity that attracted the attention of the world. Through the Chinese media, the media quickly dug out the true identity of this kung fu master. All of a sudden, the whole world exploded. Especially when the foreign media translated the Chinese media's report on poplar fruit's encounter, especially the repost of Teng Zun's news, the foreign netizens exclaimed, "Isn't this the real-life version of Hulk?" Before Hulk's transformation, he was also a genius scholar who looked weak and fragile. Of course, people were more worried about poplar fruit's encounter. Was such a heroic figure still alive? Under the incitement of Teng Zun's news, the anger of the Chinese netizens, and the attention of the whole world, the Kunming police unknowingly stood on the cusp of the storm. Of course, this was their own fault. Who asked them to not give the people a clear answer? In fact, this was also caused by not paying enough attention to it. Who asked this to be a country that paid attention to the collective instead of individual heroism? Poplar fruit's incident was really too insignificant in front of the entire terrorism case. In the middle of the night, the entire Kunming and Saiyun province's public security system was busy. They only had one goal, which was to maintain stability and eliminate violence. This included during the day when the netizens were already excited, but they were still thinking about catching the bad guys. Otherwise, they would not be able to explain to the country and the people. This idea was not wrong. It could only be said that they had not deeply realized the power of the internet. They did not realize that the era of self-media was no longer slow enough for them to respond to the information transmission speed of the traditional media. It was only when the investigation team from the central government arrived and people who truly understood the situation came that this matter was taken seriously. Therefore, there was the scene of poplar fruit receiving a call from Yang Wanxiong. Well, it was time to attend the press conference. It seemed like the promise to have dinner with Fong Beibei and Kiki in the evening was ruined again. Poplar fruit quickly took a shower and changed into a clean set of clothes. His previous clothes were ruined and stained with blood. He had worn them all day while running around, only a jacket. After changing, Fong Beibei put them in a bag for Chen Jing to use as evidence. Poplar fruit's own clothes were also lost in the chaos and could not be found in a short time. Song Jiwen ran out to buy clothes for poplar fruit. With poplar fruit's height, it was really difficult to buy clothes for him. In the end, the clothes he bought did not fit him. Poplar fruit's casual pants were worn into cropped pants. The shirt was too short, so poplar fruit simply rolled it up and wore it as a short-sleeved shirt. As for the jacket, Song Jiwen's taste was too bad. He actually bought an extremely ugly large military cotton-padded jacket. Although poplar fruit was not picky, he did not want to be burned to death by the jacket. Anyway, with his physique, he did not feel cold. Thus, he went out in his summer clothes. It had to be said that as long as a person was tall and handsome, they would look good in anything. Although poplar fruit's clothes did not fit him well, it gave him an indescribable charm. When he entered the city hall where the press conference was held, the younger female civil servants could not take their eyes off him. This was a government press conference. Naturally, It would not be like the press conference where Poplar Fruit could do whatever he wanted. Very quickly, someone came over to communicate with Poplar Fruit. Fortunately, Poplar Fruit was upright and did not offend the other party. Furthermore, there were some things that did not allow Poplar Fruit to say. Poplar Fruit did not mind. He felt that it was better to stay out of the limelight. In the hall outside, the press conference had not yet started, but the reporters who had entered were already discussing. There was no other reason. On the rostrum of the press conference, there was a nameplate with Poplar Fruit's name written on it. That's right. Maybe the Kunming police were not lying. Poplar Fruit might really be alive. It's good that he's alive. It's good that he's alive. After the bloody incident, people's expectations couldn't be any higher. There were already reporters taking pictures of Poplar Fruit's nameplate. They could not wait to share this news with the netizens and the world. Chapter 1089. Poplar Fruit was sitting quietly in the side hall, waiting for the staff to inform him to go on stage. However, at that moment, a large group of people rushed into the side hall. The one leading the group was tall and had a strong aura. If one had to give an example, the only person that Poplar Fruit had seen that could compare to him was Zhang Mingsheng. However, in comparison, Zhang Mingsheng was much more refined. He seemed to have a military background, and every movement of his had the aura of a tiger. Poplar Fruit, this is Mr. Liu from the Ministry of Public Security. Mr. Liu just arrived in Kunming this afternoon, and he immediately came to ask about you, Yang Wanxiong said with a smile. Mr. Liu, nice to meet you. Poplar Fruit quickly stood up and shook hands with him, but he felt that Mr. Liu was looking at him with a strange gaze. Heroes come from the young. Mr. Liu laughed heartily and praised, Xiao Yang, thanks to you this time, the terrorist incident did not cause more serious casualties. I thank you on behalf of the country and the people. No, I was just doing what a Chinese citizen should do, Poplar Fruit said humbly. And it was also Xiao Yang who helped to provide and discover a lot of useful clues. Yang Wanxiong felt Mr. Liu's enthusiasm for Poplar Fruit, and felt a little strange. He smiled and said, thanks to these clues, we were able to catch the escaped mastermind in time, and did not let him escape overseas. For this incident, CAI Yun will continue to investigate, and you will have to reflect and improve. For the security of this kind of public relations office, it's impossible to have an outstanding young man like Poplar Fruit cleaning up your mess all the time. Mr. Liu was not very nice to Yang Wanxiong. On the one hand, it highlighted Poplar Fruit's heroic image. On the other hand, it also exposed the police's lack of rapid response and the lack of awareness of the public's information feedback. It could be said that the Kunming police, and even the Chinese police, were being scolded by the people to the point that they could not lift their heads. Of course, don't forget about Poplar Fruit's contributions. After the investigation and arrest are completed, you must reward him according to his contributions and hold him accountable. Mr. Liu instructed. Poplar Fruit definitely had nothing to do with Poplar Fruit. The people in charge of the train station and the police force would probably be in trouble. Poplar Fruit just scratched his head in embarrassment and chuckled. He was not used to this kind of bureaucratic greeting. Little Yang, why are you wearing so little? Although it's spring, it's still very cold at night, right? After Mr. Liu finished talking about Yang Wanxiong, he began to use a gentle tone to show concern for Poplar Fruit. It was a strange feeling. It was as if the tall and dignified Mr. Liu was not a high and mighty leader of the Ministry of Public Security, but an elder who cared about Poplar Fruit. Of course, Poplar Fruit did not know that because of Zheng Yujie, Zheng Mingsheng had called his old friend who grew up in the same courtyard, Mr. Liu, who was now the head of the Ministry of Public Security. Mr. Liu roughly knew about the relationship between Poplar Fruit and the Zheng family. Naturally, he was a lot nicer to Poplar Fruit. However, Mr. Liu still felt that it was very strange because Poplar Fruit was not the son-in-law of the Zheng family. The whole country knew that Poplar Fruit had a girlfriend, and he was also not a descendant of the Zheng family. It was even more impossible for him to be a part of the Zheng family's power. Poplar Fruit was not involved in politics, so why would Zheng Mingsheng pay so much attention to Poplar Fruit? Could it be that he was Zheng Mingsheng's illegitimate son? It didn't look like it. Poplar Fruit did not know about the confused thoughts of the leader in front of him. He waved his hand and smiled. It's okay, I'm not cold. My body is quite resistant to the cold, haha. In fact, Poplar Fruit did not feel cold in the winter even if he did not wear a jacket. It was just that he did not want to be too unconventional. How can this be? Did you not find Little Yang's luggage? Arrange for a staff member to buy Little Yang a set of clothes, Mr. Liu ordered. Ah, Mr. Liu, there's no need, Poplar Fruit waved his hand and said. Yes, Mr. Liu, there's not enough time. The press conference will start in 10 minutes, Yang Wanxiong said carefully. Who said I was going to buy clothes for him to wear at the press conference? Let him change when he goes back, otherwise he will catch a cold, Mr. Liu said unhappily. Mr. Liu said angrily, also, turn up the heat in the hall. Don't let our little hero catch a cold. Poplar Fruit did not know whether to laugh or cry. It seemed that buying clothes was unavoidable. Poplar Fruit quickly stopped the staff member who wanted to go out to buy clothes. He took out the money and said, here's the money. Sorry to trouble you. My size is, do I need you to give me money for that? Mr. Liu waved his hand and said, this is a gift from the government. Poplar Fruit did not say anything and stuffed the money into the staff member's hand. It was about $1,000. He smiled and said, it's okay, I don't need this money. It's better not to burden the country. Suddenly, the way people looked at Poplar Fruit changed. How should they put it? Some admired Poplar Fruit, and some thought that he was stupid. Poplar Fruit did not care. He just wanted to be himself. Mr. Liu did not insist. He laughed and patted Poplar Fruit's shoulder. He said, okay, it's getting late. Get ready. The press conference is about to start. The staff member handed over a draft about the press conference. Poplar Fruit, who had not attended the press conference, did not read it. Poplar Fruit flipped through the draft for a minute and put it aside. Mr. Liu saw it and advised, Xiao Yang, it's better to bring it with you. Otherwise, when the reporters ask later, you won't know how to answer. He was reminding him out of kindness, and his tone was like that of an elder caring. Mr. Liu's secretary, who was familiar with him, was dumbfounded. Mr. Liu, who came from the military, was known for his fiery temper. In the past, he had been scolded many times. When had he ever been treated so gently like Yang Guo? Poplar Fruit was stunned. He pointed to his head and smiled. Mr. Liu, thank you for your reminder. But you might not know this, but I have a good memory. I just read it once and memorized it. Oh, I forgot. Xiao Yang, you are a genius with a photographic memory, Mr. Liu said with a smile. The press conference began. Under the host's announcement, a line of people entered the venue. Among them, Poplar Fruit, who was at the back, attracted everyone's attention the moment he entered. Poplar Fruit was too eye-catching. Not to mention his special position in the press conference, his youthful cropped pants and shirt stood among a group of officials in suits. He was like a crane in a flock of chickens. Of course, Poplar Fruit's appearance, unscathed and in high spirits, lifted the spirits of the reporters. They excitedly raised the cameras in their hands and snapped photos of Poplar Fruit. Our hero is fine. Everything is fine. Through the live broadcast of the press conference and the rapid spread on the internet, the reporters could not wait to share the news with the world. Chapter 1090. The police didn't do anything wrong, Poplar Fruit didn't say anything wrong, and the netizens' criticism wasn't wrong either. There was no need to talk about this matter for the time being. Since the people involved didn't care, why should they keep talking about it? Of course, there were still some extreme netizens who would continue to argue, but there was nothing they could do about it. Fortunately, they didn't represent the mainstream perception. As long as the rational netizens who cared about Poplar Fruit calmed down a little, it was fine. The press conference was still going on. The terrorism case was of course still the main topic. The reporters were all asking about the origin of the terrorists, the aftermath of the casualties, and the adjustment of the terrorist response mechanism and other important issues. In the past, the anti-terrorism deployment was mainly in the western provinces. Now it seemed that the terrorist incidents were gradually moving to the southern and eastern cities. The anti-terrorism mechanism in the cities needed to be established as soon as possible. This reminded Poplar Fruit of his big brother, He Wonjua, who called him a few hours ago. Of course, it was out of concern. However, from Big Brother He, Poplar Fruit also knew that the Guangdong province had already paid attention to the terrorist incident yesterday. Not only were there police patrolling the streets, but there were also special police to protect the crowded areas. The special forces that Big Brother He was in were also in a state of combat readiness, waiting for orders at any time. If there was a major crisis, they would be mobilized. This wasn't an exaggeration. Who knew if these terrorists who wanted to split the country would impulsively run to Yangcheng, a big city with tens of millions of people, to cause trouble? Because it was an official press conference, Poplar Fruit didn't receive many questions. Most of the time, he was invisible, sitting on the chair next to him in a daze. Although he was in a daze, it was still a kind of quiet cool. As the press conference went on, people gradually understood what Department Head Liu meant when he said that Poplar Fruit was involved in the pursuit of the escaped terrorists. I'm not proficient in Uyghur language, but I still have a certain grasp of it. During the fight, I understood some of the terrorists' conversations and understood some of their situation. Later, the police found their lair. Due to the urgency of the situation, Director Yang asked me to go over and take a look at the notes they left behind. So I helped a little. Poplar Fruit said with a smile. Yang Wanxiong did not intend to steal Poplar Fruit's credit. Besides, Department Head Liu's performance first made him want to praise Poplar Fruit even more. He took over the conversation and said with a smile, Poplar Fruit's key role is far more than that. Not only did he translate, but he also found clues to solve the case from those useless religious notes and deduced the whereabouts of the fugitive. That was how we were able to capture the fugitive in time. Although the press conference was held, many media outlets that did not have the opportunity to attend wanted to interview Poplar Fruit. However, Poplar Fruit did not intend to be interviewed. In the end, he had no choice but to accept an interview with Tengzun News. This was also the only interview he had done in Taiyuan province. It could not be helped. Tengzun News had a good relationship with Poplar Fruit. In addition, New Translation Road had reached a strategic cooperation with Tengzun Literature. Therefore, Poplar Fruit was also inextricably linked to Tengzun, so he did not have the nerve to refuse. The interview with Tengzun News was very detailed. There was no need to elaborate on the details of the past 2 days. On the other hand, Tengzun News dug up some small details about Poplar Fruit that were unknown to others but that fans and audience were eager to know. Tengzun's reporter threw out a small doubt that everyone was confused about: why did Poplar Fruit appear in Kunming? That night, the news in Liang City and Yangcheng City also talked about the news of Poplar Fruit's teaching team returning home from Liang City. This was also the reason why many people thought that it was not Poplar Fruit at the beginning. I didn't come to Taiyuan from Guishan. I'm really not Superman. Poplar Fruit laughed. In fact, this trip was decided a long time ago. Bebe, my daughter, and my good friend decided to come to Kunming before the Spring Festival, Poplar Fruit said with a smile. As for why we chose Kunming, there are 3 reasons. Poplar Fruit said with a smile. First, Kunming is very beautiful. It's Spring City and Hua Cheng, isn't it? Second, my good friend met his girlfriend in Kunming. Therefore, they came together this time to walk the path of love. Poplar Fruit shrugged. He told a very romantic story calmly. The last reason is also the main reason. We chose Kunming because it's very close to Guishan province. Poplar Fruit smiled helplessly and said, in fact, the main purpose of this trip is Bebe's birthday in a few days. Every year at this time, we have to go out and play. However, every time I happen to encounter work matters, such as last year's meeting in Macau, and this year, I have to bring university volunteers to Liang City to start school with the children. Bebe has always been very accommodating to me, so last year, I spent her birthday with Kiki in Macau. This year, her birthday was chosen in Taiyuan province, which is very close to Guishan. Poplar Fruit smiled slightly. He did not know that after his explanation was announced by the reporters, many fans who were not optimistic about him and Fong Bebe in the past turned from haters to fans in an instant. There were also many audience members who did not know about him before who were moved. I've always been learning Kung Fu. I've liked it since I was young. Maybe it's because of my talent. Although most of it was self-taught, I still learned it very well. Poplar Fruit did not avoid the topic and answered Teng Zun News questions about his skills. I learned my swordsmanship from an old man from the Miao tribe 2 years ago. He was a veteran who participated in the war in South Vietnam. At that time, he was called a scout. Now, he's called a special forces soldier. He's very skilled. I heard that he was also an existence that made the enemy tremble in fear in South Vietnam. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, in comparison, he's the real hero because he protected the integrity of the country's territory. That's why we have the beautiful life we have now. Generally, reporters would ask the Good Samaritan what he thought at that time, and Poplar Fruit was also asked this question. Scared, of course I was scared. There were 7 or 8 people on the other side. They were all armed with swords. Poplar Fruit recalled and said, but I really didn't think too much at first because my daughter, my girlfriend, and my friends were all in danger. I had to stand up and save them. In the beginning, I could still win with my bare hands because the other party underestimated me. There was also a woman among these terrorists who didn't even let children go. However, she could only be fierce to the unarmed masses. I still made her reveal her true form. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, after that, I went out to fight with the other 5 people in the hall. I knew that I couldn't beat them, but I had to go out. Because if I didn't go out, no one could stop their killing. Poplar Fruit said seriously, however, I wasn't very afraid because I was flexible. As long as I kept fighting, they couldn't do anything to me. Once I got the chance, I could get rid of the people who were alone as soon as possible. Even if I couldn't get rid of them, I thought that the crisis would be solved when the police arrived. The reporter from Teng Zun News asked Poplar Fruit if he had thought about what his future path would be after this incident. This question was a little strange to Poplar Fruit. He laughed and asked, what's the difference? That's right. To Poplar Fruit, his hero pathway was only to protect his family and save more innocent tourists. He had never thought of using this opportunity to become a celebrity or change his life trajectory. Besides, did Poplar Fruit not have many opportunities to become famous in the past? The reporter from Teng Zun News obviously understood Poplar Fruit. He did not continue to dwell on this question. Instead, he changed the topic and asked Poplar Fruit if he had any plans for literary translation this year. People were shocked by Poplar Fruit's ability to translate 2 Nobel Prize-winning scholars in 2 years. They were looking forward to seeing if Poplar Fruit would create another miracle this year. In this incident, many famous writers stood up for Poplar Fruit and questioned the Kunming police. This momentum could also see the skyrocketing influence of Poplar Fruit. In fact, Poplar Fruit did not plan to translate books for any Nobel Prize candidates this year. Instead, he planned to digest the translation work he had accumulated and add another helping hand to the promotion of Chinese online literature. The Foreign Literature Awards are all about the hard strength of the writers. If they can do it, they can do it. If they can't, they can't. It's not something that a small translation like me can affect the results, Poplar Fruit said with a smile. Everyone really thinks too highly of me. However, at the end of the day, literature still has to return to the word literature, right? Poplar Fruit ended the interview with a rather philosophical sentence. He did not continue to chat with the reporters. Kiki was still waiting for her father to tell her a story in the hotel to sleep. Chapter 1091. Fong Beibei was not worried. Poplar Fruit had been called away in a hurry in the morning. In the afternoon, the leader had time to meet him, so Poplar Fruit needed to go there and wait. Fortunately, Fong Beibei and the others had prepared clothes for Poplar Fruit yesterday. After Poplar Fruit left, Fong Beibei wondered if she should take Kiki for a stroll. She had never been to the capital, although it was once the place where her father studied and worked hard. Just as she was thinking about this, Zhang Yujie knocked on the door. Sister Yujie, her? Fong Beibei was stunned for a while and blinked her eyes. The atmosphere was a bit subtle. Ma, wait for Kiki. Kiki hasn't put on shoes yet. Kiki ran over in a panic. She heard the sound of the door opening and thought that her mother didn't want her to go play by herself. Hearing Kiki calling Fong Beibei, Zhang Yujia's pupils, which were hidden behind the sunglasses, shrank slightly and felt a stabbing pain in her heart. Hey, it's Auntie. Kiki squeezed her little head out from Fong Beibei's feet and looked at Zhang Yujia. She giggled and said, Auntie, good morning. My papa is not at home. Kiki, good morning. The little girl's politeness made Zhang Yujia's cold expression a bit cold. She slightly raised the corner of her mouth and greeted, Auntie didn't come here to look for your father today. Fong Beibei stepped aside, pulled Kiki's hand, and said with a smile, Sister Yujia, come in and sit down. Don't stand at the door and talk. Zhang Yujia nodded slightly. She took off the veil on her head and walked in, but she didn't sit down. Since you've come to the capital, I have to do my part as a host. Zhang Yujia smiled and said, Poplar Fruit isn't here, so I'll take you guys out to play today. Sister Yujia, you're so busy. I don't want to trouble you. Fong Beibei had a strange feeling in her heart. She smiled and said, I'm not busy. I've already arranged everything in Yangcheng. Zhang Yujia's red lips parted slightly as she slowly said, Moreover, it's not convenient for you to go out. I have a car, so I can take you for a ride. Sure. Kiki likes to go for a ride. Kiki likes to go for a ride in a car. Zhang Yujia's last sentence could be said to have grasped Kiki's itch. She immediately became excited and pulled Fong Beibei's hand as she jumped in joy. You guys aren't as familiar with the capital as I am. Follow me, and I guarantee that you guys will have fun. Zhang Yujia looked at Fong Beibei, her exquisite nose slightly raised under her sunglasses. Then, okay. Kiki's side was in a mess, and Fong Beibei was also at her wit's end. Furthermore, Zhang Yujia had invited her so warmly, so she simply nodded her head. 20 minutes later, Fong Beibei and the others sat in Zhang Yujia's Maserati. The cool model and luxurious interior made Fong Beibei a little uncomfortable. She nervously hugged Kiki. She didn't dare to stretch her legs out, afraid that she would break something in the luxury car. Put on your seat belt. Why are you nervous? Zhang Yujia looked at the rearview mirror, smiled, and said, Poplar Fruit is the same as you. It's his first time sitting in this car, so he's also nervous. Is this car expensive? Fong Beibei asked in a low voice. It doesn't cost 10 million. Zhang Yujia shook her head and said, It's not like you can't afford it. Poplar Fruit earned more than 100 million last year. If you don't donate it, you can buy 10 Maseratis at home. There's no need to buy such an expensive car. It's good to have a car to drive. With money saved, we can do a lot of things. Fong Beibei said softly. That's right. Zhang Yujia smiled and said, however, sometimes, a woman shouldn't treat herself too badly. She should spend what she needs. It's good not to waste it, but it's unnecessary to be too harsh on herself and her family. Fong Beibei's mouth slightly pursed. She felt a little wronged. Saving money is her character, but she didn't blame Poplar Fruit for not letting him spend money. Even though Fong Beibei has been Poplar Fruit's girlfriend for so long, she has never thought of controlling Poplar Fruit's finances. Of course, Poplar Fruit didn't hide anything from her. His bank card number and password, Fong Beibei also knows everything that he knows. Including credit cards, Poplar Fruit uses the main card, while Fong Beibei uses the side card without limit. Zhang Yujia is also a clever person. Seeing Fong Beibei's expression, she didn't continue to say anything. She smiled and said, Today, let's go shopping and buy some clothes. Buy clothes? Fong Beibei was a little puzzled. Yes, buy clothes. I'll buy clothes for you and Chichi. Zhang Yujia said, Yesterday, I saw your eyes for choosing clothes. To be honest, I don't dare to compliment you. Today, Sister will take you to change your appearance and be reborn. This is the first time Zhang Yujia called herself sister in front of Fong Beibei. Of course, the relationship between the two of them is not close to this extent. But, this call of sister, Fong Beibei's barely maintained small aura was overshadowed. Fong Beibei opened her mouth, but still didn't say anything to oppose. Kiki mischievously pulled the back of the seat in front of her and happily asked, Then, can Auntie buy Kiki a pair of sunglasses as beautiful as Auntie's? In fact, Kiki has always wanted it, But Poplar Fruit was worried that the little fellow would wear glasses so early, it would crush her beautiful little nose, so he refused to buy it for her. Of course, as long as Kiki likes it, Auntie will buy it for you, Zheng Yujie said with a smile while driving. Without waiting for Kiki to cheer, Fong Beibei rubbed Kiki's little head and asked, "Buy sunglasses, aren't you afraid that when you go back, your father will spank you?" "Afraid of what?" "If your father bullies you, you can complain to Auntie." Zheng Yujie snorted and said, "A girl should dress herself up beautifully, not to mention our Princess Kiki, right?" "Yes." Kiki's eyes curved with a smile. She has no resistance to others saying that she is beautiful and a princess. "And you?" Zhang Yujie paused and said to Fong Beibei, "Beibei, don't be angry. I have to say that you dress up beautifully, but do these clothes suit your current status?" Poplar Fruit has an endorsement deal, so most of his clothes are Givenchy, right? Zhang Yujie asked. Fong Beibei nodded. Like last night, it was Zhang Yujie who reminded them that they didn't make a mistake and directly asked Givenchy's people to send clothes for Poplar Fruit to choose. Otherwise, if Poplar Fruit went to see the #1 official in such a big occasion, Givenchy would definitely make a scene. Wouldn't that be embarrassing, Givenchy? The industry would laugh to death at Givenchy's expense. Your family can't even afford clothes. Then you and him are a couple. You wear clothes that cost a few dozen yuan, and he wears clothes that cost a few thousand yuan, Zheng Yujie said slowly. If I don't mention Poplar Fruit, he definitely won't care. But what about other people's opinions? The whole of China will be watching. The difference in the price of your clothes is so big, what will other people think of him? It seemed that Fong Beibei was convinced. Thank you to the fans at Chidian for their tips. Xiao Han, who hasn't seen tips in a long time, is so grateful. Of course, the most important thing is to thank you for your great support. Xiao Han will work hard to continue writing, although the book's results are really terrible. Chapter 1092. Poplar Fruit had heard people say that there were many hidden experts in the inner palace. Now, he could clearly feel it. The guards at the door were all experts, at least as strong as Xiong Da. The further he went in, the stronger the pressure of the guards. At least, Poplar Fruit had seen 5 or 6 of them, and each of them could beat Meng Sanhua to the ground. That was the case on the surface, but the real experts were hidden in the dark and in the crowd. For example, in the office of the hall, a middle-aged man with glasses was writing a manuscript. When he looked up, his eyes shone brightly. The way he looked at Poplar Fruit was no less than any martial arts expert that Poplar Fruit had ever seen. On his body, there was an aura that was different from ordinary experts. Only inner sect experts could sense it, and only inner sect experts could release it. "Kid, you're not bad." The middle-aged man smiled at Poplar Fruit. Then, he hid the light in his eyes and sat back down. He continued to write his manuscript and adjusted his glasses, as if nothing had happened. Poplar Fruit's fighting spirit that had just been aroused was like a punch to the air. There was no target to receive it. Poplar Fruit scratched his head. In fact, he really wanted to spar with an expert. Only then would he know his true strength. Experts like Meng Sanhua, including the budding internal martial arts expert Liang Bin, were like underage children in front of Poplar Fruit. Unfortunately, there were too few true experts in the secular world, or perhaps it was better to say that they hid too deeply. Xiong Kahu was too old and was unable to display his true strength. The old master of the Xingyi martial arts dojo cherished his reputation too much and was unwilling to spar with Yang Guo. Thus, Yang Guo always felt that he was alone and seeking defeat. Today, he finally met an expert who seemed to be on the same level as him. Unfortunately, the environment here was special, and there was no way for him to spar. As he walked up the stairs, Poplar Fruit looked out of the window as if he had sensed something. There was nothing. He blinked in confusion and continued to walk up the stairs until he entered the waiting meeting room. The strange feeling came to an abrupt end when the door closed. He didn't know that a few people were secretly squatting on the outer eaves of this building that could be said to be the most heavily guarded building in all of China. There was only a small space to stand on. Their clothes fluttered in the wind, but they were not afraid of falling down. There were armed policemen patrolling the area. They raised their heads and looked at them. The corners of their mouths twitched, but they still walked over. If Poplar Fruit found out, he would know that they were talking about him. However, that was no longer important. Because in the eyes of these old monsters, Yang Guo is just a child. Why does it sound so familiar? At most, he was a little kid. In the future, when Yang Guo's kung fu can really surpass people's understanding and surpass all the masters, he reckoned that he would have the qualifications to talk to these old monsters. Right now, he was just a young boy nervously waiting in the meeting room. Although Poplar Fruit had seen a lot of big scenes, the leader was still the leader. Poplar Fruit couldn't avoid being nervous. This nervousness was especially strong when the leader entered the room. Fortunately, the leader was very kind to him. Like an elder, he asked about Poplar Fruit's situation. Poplar Fruit thought that the leader summoned him because of his heroic actions at the train station. But Poplar Fruit was wrong. In fact, what really interested the leader and called Poplar Fruit from thousands of miles away to Beijing was something else. His heroic actions were just a fuse. After the leader saw the investigation on Poplar Fruit, he finally decided to meet this interesting young man with rich experience and talent that could withstand the praise of the language world. Basically, the leader asked, and Poplar Fruit answered honestly. There were two topics. One was Poplar Fruit's research on new models and methods of Chinese teaching. The other was the big deal of online literature translation that the new translation road had been working on. Although the two topics were said to be two different topics, they belonged to the same theme, the spread of Chinese culture. The central government attached great importance to the word-splitting method proposed by Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit now knew that although the research team he was in was organized by the Ministry of Education, the leader had personally asked, urged, and attached great importance to it. China has a long history and deep cultural heritage. This is a fact, but only our own people know and understand it. The leader said, when we open the door, not only do we have to let them in, but we also have to go out. The leader attached great importance to the issue of going out of Chinese culture. This could be seen from the gifts he gave to the leaders of other countries when he visited other countries. Traditional embroidery portraits, excellent domestic movies and TV series, albums of Chinese classics, and so on. All of them highlighted the excellent traditional culture of China over the past 5,000 years. If the new translation road was to let the emerging Chinese online literature go out, then the word-splitting method that Poplar Fruit was further researching and perfecting was to let foreigners see in. There was a deep gap between Chinese and English and other foreign languages. If Poplar Fruit could promote the reduction of the difficulty of learning Chinese, then he believed that it could inspire more people to learn Chinese and understand China. Of course, after the conversation with Poplar Fruit, the leader also became interested in online literature. He said that he would understand this kind of online derivative that was outside the scope of literature. There was no reason why online literature, which was popular in China and abroad, was worthless as traditional literature scholars said. Perhaps, it was time to give it a proper name. Of course, the leader attached the most importance to the word-splitting method. This was the key to increasing the value of Chinese. While encouraging Poplar Fruit, the leader also sternly urged Poplar Fruit to focus on this important matter that concerned the country and the nation. If you need anything, report to the country at any time. If anyone wants to obstruct your research, report to the country at any time. Poplar Fruit was confused by this benefit. He did not know that with the leader's imperial edict, he could almost do whatever he wanted in the country. Of course, as simple as Poplar Fruit was, he would not abuse this power to fight for anything. However, Poplar Fruit did not know that after he was received by the leader in Beijing, although the news was not reported, it quickly spread among the senior officials in the country. Poplar Fruit, although the name was very common, from today onwards, he was no longer a small figure that anyone could bully. Poplar Fruit would not feel this change at the moment, but soon, Poplar Fruit would realize how great the benefits of this meeting were. This was all in the future. Chapter 1093. Poplar Fruit returned to the hotel in a daze. When he saw the number one leader, he still felt like he was in a dream. Opening the door, Poplar Fruit stretched and sat comfortably on the sofa. Poplar Fruit then realized that Fong Beibei and Kiki were not in the hotel. Especially Kiki, this clingy little girl did not hang around her father's neck as soon as she entered the room. Did they go out to play? It should be. Before Poplar Fruit went out in the morning, he told Fong Beibei to go out and play by herself. After sitting for a while, Poplar Fruit picked up the phone and called her. It was still early, far from dinner time. Poplar Fruit planned to look for Fong Beibei to play together. However, before the call went through, the door was pushed open. Before anyone came in, the crazy laughter could be heard. Yang Guo was dumbstruck as she saw the three fashionable girls walk in one after another. They wore a smooth and small fragrant dress, a classic and exquisite blue and white cheongsam, and a thin black silk suit. It was as if she was watching a small fashion show. However, what surprised Poplar Fruit was not the clothes, but Fong Beibei and Zhang Yujie were talking and laughing. It was as if they were good sisters who had just returned from shopping. Put down the clothes, let's go to Xiangshan Park. Zhang Yujie waved her hand domineeringly and took the lead to put the big and small bags on the table. Until now, they had not noticed that Poplar Fruit was back. This was because of the angle of the room. She was wearing a pair of cute, pink, light-colored sunglasses and a fragrant long dress. She looked as pretty as a little adult, and Chichi was holding her little flowery hat in her hands. She was in a very good mood. Ah! Suddenly, Kiki shook her little head with sunglasses and turned her head to see her father sitting on the sofa looking at them. She was completely unprepared and screamed in shock. "Uncle!" Kiki's cry attracted the attention of Fong Beibei and Zhang Yujie, who were talking and laughing. When Fong Beibei saw Poplar Fruit, she was surprised at first, and then she felt ashamed and angry. "Hey, uncle, is it fun to hide here and scare people?" Fong Beibei bit her lower lip and stomped her feet. Her silk dress looked very similar to the splash ink-style clothes that Poplar Fruit used to wear on stage. However, because it was made of light and agile silk, the different shades of black and white also appeared very charming. Especially the transparent muslin around her collarbone and waist, which made her look bold and fashionable. Poplar Fruit said with a wry smile, "I just came back and sat here. I didn't realize that you were not in the room. How could I hide from you to scare you?" As he spoke, Poplar Fruit's eyes couldn't help but look at the faintly discernible piece of white skin on Fong Beibei's waist. How long has it been? Since he practiced Tai Chi internal strength, which could control his chi and blood, how long has it been since he lost control like today? If it was outside, perhaps Poplar Fruit would be scolded as a peeping Tom, although he had seen Fong Beibei many times and was familiar with her body from head to toe. However, it was this kind of looming temptation that kept knocking on Poplar Fruit's heartstrings. If Zhang Yujie wore such clothes, Poplar Fruit wouldn't be curious. He would even think that Zhang Yujie was conservative. However, Fong Beibei usually dressed very conservatively. Feeling Poplar Fruit's burning gaze, Fong Beibei shyly reached out her hand to block it and asked carefully, "Isn't it too revealing?" Revealing? Poplar Fruit, who had been influenced by the art of fashion at Baili Fashion Week, had seen all kinds of revealing. Fong Beibei's clothes were really not considered revealing. He smiled slightly and looked into Fong Beibei's eyes and said, "How could it be? It's very beautiful." Although he didn't say it directly, the love in Poplar Fruit's eyes was clearly seen by Fong Beibei. I was the one who picked the clothes." Zhang Yujie saw that Poplar Fruit's eyes had just swept past her chest and then were attracted to Fong Beibei's body like a magnet. Her heart was sour and she couldn't help but snort. Was the power of love really greater? Her excellent figure was not as attractive as his girlfriend. Zhang Yujie regretted taking Fong Beibei to pick out such beautiful clothes. Fong Beibei was as beautiful as a little white flower. After putting on the new clothes, she was pure with a hint of charm. It could be said that not only Poplar Fruit, but any man would go crazy for her. Poplar Fruit heard Zhang Yujie's words. He turned his head and was about to say something when a small body suddenly squeezed into his arms. "Papa, where's Kiki? Is Kiki beautiful?" Kiki kept praising Fong Beibei when she saw her father, but she was ignored. Today was Kiki's most beautiful day. Like Fong Beibei, the most beautiful day must be appreciated by her father. Kiki is also beautiful. Poplar Fruit hugged Kiki and gently rubbed Kiki's bangs. Her hair was braided, and said with a smile. In fact, Poplar Fruit sighed with emotion in his heart. Today's Kiki was not only cute and beautiful, but also made Poplar Fruit suddenly realize that compared to before, the baby fat on Kiki's face had gradually faded, and the childishness on her body was also covered by the clothes. She had already become as dignified and beautiful as a big girl. Of course, Kiki was still the most lovely little thing in Poplar Fruit's heart. No matter how much the clothes looked like a little adult, it could not change the fact that Kiki was less than 3 years old. But Poplar Fruit was happy to see his daughter grow more and more beautiful, just like how he looked at Fong Bebe just now. Poplar Fruit was reluctant to look away from his daughter, and his heart was like a spring flower, blooming in spring. Poplar Fruit was so happy that he did not even care about the sunglasses that Kiki was wearing, and had been smiling happily. These are all thanks to Sister Yujie. Fong Bebe held Zheng Yujie's arm and said, "Today, we went shopping all morning and bought a lot of clothes." Thinking of today's expenses, Fong Bebe stuck out her small tongue and said, "It was Sister Yujie who paid the bill. She didn't let me use my card. It doesn't matter, she doesn't care about this little money." Poplar Fruit waved his hand and laughed. "Alive, in your eyes, is my money not money?" Zhang Yujie stared at Poplar Fruit, stretched out her jade-like arm, and pointed her palm in front of Poplar Fruit and said, "Return the money, with interest, 50,000 yuan. After messing around for a while, Poplar Fruit let out a sigh of relief. The relationship between Fong Bebe and Zheng Yujie had improved a lot, and now he did not have to worry about it. "Oh right, Yujie, today I went to see the number 1 leader. He asked about the publishing house." Poplar Fruit said, and talked about today's matter. Stop. Zhang Yujie waved her hand and said, "We'll talk about work when we get back to Yangcheng. Don't dawdle here, we agreed to go to the park this afternoon. Since you're back, let's go together." Go to the park? Kiki wants to go to the park with Papa. Kiki, who was a little bored, cheered, ran up to her father, and dragged Poplar Fruit outside. Chapter 1094. On the morning of the 3rd day after Fong Bebe's birthday, a plane from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing suddenly went missing. No one knew that the Malaysian Airlines plane, MH370, had disappeared without a trace. The rescue operation that was focused on by the entire world didn't have any results even after a few months. All 239 people on the plane, including the crew, were either lost or buried in the boundless ocean along with the plane. Perhaps people were more willing to believe that the plane had passed through a wormhole and that the missing people were just living well in another dimension. When this incident spread out, Poplar Fruit and Fong Bebe, who had just returned to Yangcheng on the night of the 7th of March, were so shocked that they broke out in a cold sweat. At the same time, they couldn't help but feel lucky. In the face of these huge natural and man-made disasters, it was really good to be alive. In reality, the Kunming train station incident was just the beginning of a tragic year in 2014. In April, the Korean passenger ship Suizu sank into the ocean on live television, causing the deaths of over 300 passengers. This incident shocked the world again after MH370. Of course, the most heart-wrenching incident was the Kunming train station incident that endangered public safety and caused a large number of casualties. In May, there was a terrorist attack at the Uremi train station. Not only did terrorists kill people with knives, but they also detonated bombs, causing 1 death and 80 injuries. However, just 5 days later, there was another attack at the Yangcheng train station. This time, although it was in Yangcheng, Poplar Fruit wasn't Superman and couldn't save the world again. However, Yangcheng had already practiced a complete anti-terrorist system and subdued the bad guys in place of Superman. It only caused 6 injuries and didn't lead to any serious consequences. However, the anti-terrorist system was far from over. In Xinjiang, other than the attack at the U2 train station, there were 2 other terrible incidents. 2 of them were the incidents where 2 cars without license plates intentionally crashed and exploded in a downtown area, causing 39 deaths and 90 injuries. 2014 was destined to be an extraordinary year. Other than the incidents mentioned above, there were all kinds of earthquakes, plane accidents that continued to occur in the second half of the year, and the Ebola virus epidemic that affected the entire world in 2014. In the last hour of 2014, a stampede took place at the New Year's Eve on the Bund in Shanghai, causing nearly 40 deaths. Under the repeated reports of the news, it was as if 2014 was shrouded in ominous clouds. Everyone was in a state of panic. No one knew if they would suddenly meet with a mishap. It was precisely because of this series of disaster news that attracted people's attention that after Poplar Fruit returned to Guangzhou, he only accepted a few interviews that he couldn't refuse before once again withdrawing from the media's attention. Because of this, the focus of Poplar Fruit's work had gradually shifted from teaching and translating to the research of word splitting. Of course, this didn't mean that Poplar Fruit was no longer a lecturer and translator. It was just that his translations were no longer as frequent as before. At most, he would publish one book a month, and he would focus on translating Granny Menlo's works. This year, there were still a lot of authors begging for his help. There were even some pseudo-authors who wanted Poplar Fruit to help them translate their works through official channels. Although the school helped Poplar Fruit block most of the criticism, there were some that even Chen Zhongdai couldn't refuse. Fortunately, Poplar Fruit had a death exemption card. The number one leader instructed the Ministry of Education and the senior scholars of the research team to back him up. Poplar Fruit wasn't afraid of them threatening him. However, it would take a lot of time to perfect the word disassembly method to the point where it could be popularized. Yang Guo estimated that this semester's time was barely enough. However, Poplar Fruit's performance won the praise of the scholars of the research team. If it weren't for the fact that Higoshiyama University refused to let him go and Poplar Fruit didn't want to leave, there might have been another poaching storm. Poplar Fruit's translated works had decreased, but the number of books published by New Translation Road had increased. Compared to last year, New Translation Road released more than 100 new translations every month. Although the quality wasn't necessarily comparable to Poplar Fruit's translations, it was a lot better than last year. This was all because of the increase in translators. In addition to the talents cultivated by New Translation Road and Xinda Translation Platform, there were also many translators who specialized in literary translation. In the first year, people were watching, worried that New Translation Road was just a flash in the pan. However, after New Translation Road shocked the entire Chinese publishing industry with its unparalleled performance, people began to believe in the strength and vision of New Translation Road. Poplar Fruit's promotion of translators participating in the sales sharing system became an important condition to attract many excellent translators. Even though this system was unique in China, it did bring about a revolutionary impact on the traditional translation industry. New Translation Road's translators received an average annual income of 300,000 yuan through the sales sharing, and this was based on the fact that most translators' standards were not high enough at that time. This kind of income made many translators envious. They didn't hesitate to leave the publishing houses they had worked with for a long time and joined the emerging New Translation Road publishing house. This situation had a great impact on traditional publishing houses. Many publishing houses in the industry even tried to unite to block New Translation Road. Unfortunately, New Translation Road didn't follow their traditional publishing channels. The focus of their business was overseas, not in China. Their manuscript sources were very sufficient. The online literary works that had been completed before had long been bought out by New Translation Road. In the future, there would be a rich partner, Tengzun Literature. It was a joke to block New Translation Road, even if they used tricks and tricks. In Guangdong province, where Zheng Mingsheng was covering, who could use any despicable means to his daughter? Poplar Fruit and Zheng Yujie were both fighting for their own careers, and Feng Beibei was not weak either. Although she didn't have the guidance of a senior or the help of Poplar Fruit, she considerately didn't let Poplar Fruit take time to accompany her. She drove her beetle alone. In March and April, she built a large pet hospital. In terms of hardware, the pet hospital, which cost a lot of money, had been fully renovated and equipped. In terms of manpower, the pet hospital also signed a dozen veterinarians, who were taking care of stray cats and dogs in the rescue center before opening. In the veterinary team, there were old and experienced veterinarians, as well as young people who had just graduated from school. While ensuring the stability of the team, It also retained the vitality of young people, which was very necessary for the pet hospital, the customers, and the pet. Fong Beibei had already chosen the opening time of the pet hospital. It was the third day of Kiki's birthday, which was the beginning of the May Day Golden Holiday. Before opening, Fong Beibei and Chen Anlan would study new publicity plans for the mobile internet era. Chapter 1095. In the blink of an eye, it was the end of April again, the day of Kiki's birthday. Ever since Poplar Fruit celebrated her first birthday in her life, she had been counting her fingers in anticipation of her birthday every year. Because this would be her happiest day. She would have a birthday cake to eat and many, many gifts to receive. And today was Kiki's third birthday. Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei naturally couldn't wait to prepare everything for the little fellow. Since dawn, they had already prepared a day-long birthday celebration for Kiki. Happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you. With a glance from Poplar Fruit, Fong Beibei pushed open the door and the two of them entered in a single file while singing. In the large bedroom, the rising sun warmly shone through the curtains of the floor-to-ceiling glass and onto the silk-embroidered blanket. A delicate and cute little person had kicked off the blanket with one foot and was sleeping in the middle of the big bed, sprawled out on all fours. Fong Beibei sang slowly, like a nightingale singing, but Poplar Fruit destroyed this beautiful scene. He always couldn't keep up with Fong Beibei's rhythm, either fast or slow. For this reason, Poplar Fruit also ate a lot of Fong Beibei's sanitary eyes floating over. However, it was also because of Poplar Fruit's existence that Kiki's long eyelashes trembled and she finally opened her sleepy eyes. Awake, our little princess. Poplar Fruit smiled and walked over. After sitting up with Kiki in his arms, he put a crown made of paper cards on Kiki's head. Then Fong Beibei clapped her hands hard and praised, "Princess Kiki is so beautiful." Kiki was still a little confused. She rubbed her eyes and then smiled foolishly. Maybe she hadn't reacted yet, but when she heard the words birthday and princess, Kiki was very happy. Go, brush your teeth and wash your face. Fong Beibei picked up Kiki and said, "Mama, where's Kiki's present?" After washing her face, Kiki finally recovered her spirit. Her two big eyes were shining as she asked expectantly, "The present should be saved and opened together at night. This is the most interesting, isn't it?" Fong Beibei said with a smile. "In a while, your aunt Zhang Yujie will come to pick you up and take you to play roller sports. Then at noon, Dad and Mom will take you to Grandpa and Grandma's house for lunch." At the dining table, Fong Beibei fed Kiki breakfast, and Poplar Fruit went through the plan for today. "We'll come back to open the present at night. Then what about the present that Uncle Mosquito promised to give to Kiki?" Kiki asked anxiously. "Also, Brother Yubor and Sister Shanshan." Poplar Fruit laughed and said, "Don't worry, they sent the present to your dad a long time ago. Dad will take care of it for you. I promise you'll open it to your heart's content tonight." However, Kiki was not happy later. This sudden situation was unexpected by Poplar Fruit. It wasn't because Chichi had gotten injured while playing roller skates with Zhang Yujie. Instead, it was because she had lunch at Father Fang's and Mother Fang's house when the news on TV made Chichi unhappy. The final guest list of the second season of Where Are You Going, Dad? The original 5 pairs of fathers and children have all been replaced. The new fathers are Lu Yi, Cao Ji, Huang Lei, Yong Wei, and Wu Zhengyu. This is almost the same as the previous list. Yes, in the blink of an eye, more than half a year had passed. The first season of Where Are You Going, Dad ended so long ago, and the second season was finally going to start again. It was reasonable to say that Kiki, who loved to see where her dad went, should be very happy. However, when she saw this news, not only was Kiki not happy, but she was so depressed that she shed tears. She could not even eat the rich lunch that her grandparents had prepared for her at noon. "Kiki, tell Dad, what's wrong?" Poplar Fruit went upstairs, gently knocked on the door, and then walked into Fong Beibei's boudoir where Kiki was. Kiki was hiding at the foot of the bed, hugging her knees and pouting unhappily. She ran upstairs without eating 2 mouthfuls of food. It turned out that she was depressed alone. Chichi was usually so happy that she didn't have a care in the world. Now that she looked so sad that she couldn't even speak, she looked just like the heart-wrenching Miss Xiaoqian in the TV series. Big Brother Kimi isn't going. Where did Papa go? Kai Kai twisted her fingers in front of her and pouted. Poplar Fruit smiled. He sat down next to Kiki, took Kiki into his arms with his big hands, and said, if he didn't go, where would the other children go? Maybe the children in this episode will be cuter, and the show will be more exciting. But Chichi likes Kimi Gij a lot. Chichi said with a pout as she hung onto her father's neck. It doesn't matter. Even if Brother Kimi doesn't go, you can still see Brother Kimi on Uncle Xiaoji's Weibo, Poplar Fruit said with a smile. In fact, after Poplar Fruit ended, Kiki often took Poplar Fruit's mobile phone to look at Xiaoji and the other father's Weibo. She wanted to know what happened to the fun brothers and sisters. Also, don't you like to see where Dad goes? Kiki's mood seemed to be better, and Poplar Fruit continued to comfort her. Now that it's on the air again, you should be happy. In fact, Chichi had a deeper affection for the show Where Are We Going, Daddy? Last year, when the first season of Where Are We Going, Daddy, had ended, the little girl was crying her eyes out. That was not because of Kimi, but if Brother Kimi also goes on Where Dad Goes, then Kiki will be even happier. Kiki's analytical ability had improved a lot compared to before, so it was almost impossible for Poplar Fruit to fool Kiki. Chichi, let me tell you something. Dad read an article before. It said that even if Xiaoji and Kimi didn't make it to the second season of Where Did Dad Go? They would definitely make a guest appearance in one episode. Poplar Fruit threw out his trump card and said with a smile, so you see, there will still be a chance to see Brother Kimi in the future, right? Really? It was only at this time that Chichi's eyes finally brightened up. Poplar Fruit gently brushed Kiki's hair that flew to the corner of her mouth. Looking at her, he couldn't help but smile and nodded with a smile. In the evening, Kiki, accompanied by her parents, was ready to blow out the birthday candles. Now was the time to make a wish. Looking at his daughter, who was illuminated by the candlelight in the dark, Poplar Fruit whispered softly to Fong Beibei, "Hey, I really didn't expect that my daughter is already 3 years old, and she's going to be 4 soon. You're going to be 4 soon." Fong Beibei pinched Poplar Fruit, annoyed and amused. If Kiki was going to be 4 soon, what would happen to her mother, who was just starting to be 3? I mean, I can't bear to see my daughter grow up. Poplar Fruit weakly explained to himself. On the other side, Kiki was praying devoutly, "Delicious and super powerful cake god, please promise to fulfill Kiki's wish. Kiki wants to go to the party with Papa. Where is Papa going? I want to. Finally, Kiki opened her eyes and blew out all the candles on the cake. Because her father said that the wish would only come true if all the candles were blown out. What wish did Kiki make? Poplar Fruit asked with a smile. If it was easy to solve, Poplar Fruit planned to secretly give Kiki a surprise tonight. I can't tell Papa. If I tell Papa, the wish won't come true, Kiki pouted and said. Poplar Fruit was stunned. He jumped up and shouted, "Whoa, you little guy, you still have a secret, right?" Giggle, giggle tilde Kiki's bell-like laughter echoed in the big house, which was once again filled with light. Chapter 1096. In May, the grass was long, the orioles were flying, and the flowers were blooming in the garden. People's mood was as good as the weather, sunny and cheerful. That month, other than the low-key opening of Fong Beibei's pet hospital at the beginning of the month and the high-profile promotion on WeChat and Weibo, it seemed that the month would pass by peacefully. However, at the end of the month, a person who appeared on the campus of Higoshiyama University caused quite a stir. In fact, when this person came in, he was very low-key. He looked like an ordinary round-neck t-shirt, wrapped in a casual suit jacket, and a pair of nondescript jeans. In terms of clothing, he was simply a combination of a passerby and a decadent man, not to mention his naturally curly hair that didn't need to be blown, permed, or dyed. However, with such an ordinary face, he had only taken a few steps into Dongshan University's campus when he was recognized by a few girls coming from the opposite direction. Wow! Wang Shitsong! The girls of Higoshiyama University were still somewhat reserved. However, when they saw the nation's husband, they threw their reservations to the back of their minds and screamed without caring about anything else. Although the girl did not stop Wang Shutsong, her screams and uncontrollable phone calls and announcements on WeChat immediately made the whole campus boil. Really? Where is he? Regardless of whether they believed it or not, regardless of whether they were fans or haters of the nation's husband, regardless of whether they were free or not, with the Chinese's nature of joining in the fun, the campus was immediately crowded. Wang Shutsong was already prepared. A few strong bodyguards in black helped to protect him. He squeezed through the crowd of onlookers and slowly walked forward. Of course, with Wang Shutsong's personality, when he walked, he still waved at the crowd of onlookers, causing many girls to scream. This rich second generation, a young master with a golden spoon in his mouth since birth, attracted a lot of haters on the internet because of his wealth flaunting and casual ridicule from time to time. But from his past statements, it could be seen that he wasn't an evil person who would run amok. Think about it, a real evil person would want to keep a low profile, so why would he repeatedly start a group ridicule mode on the internet? Looking at the words he said, I'm afraid there are many people in our lives who don't dare to say it out loud, right? On the other hand, he paid attention to the trending news on the internet, paid attention to and invested in esports, and even scolded some celebrities from time to time regardless of the consequences. These actions were actually very down-to-earth. He was not a lonely and aloof person who was some rich young master. It was precisely because of his sincerity and closeness to the people that he won the favor of many people. Of course, there was no need to talk about those idiots, regardless of gender, who only had eyes for Wang Shutsong's father's wealth and called him their husband. Why did he come to Higoshiyama University? Many people couldn't help but ask. Netizens with wild imaginations had already begun to speculate, could it be that this nation's husband has taken a fancy to some girl from Higoshiyama University? That might be the case. Wang Shutsong's personality is straightforward, and he is also very open-minded when it comes to relationships. He has a lot of rumored girlfriends. Although he used to mainly be peripheral women, who knows if he will change his goal and aim at the talented and beautiful high school beauties. At this time, in a classroom in the teaching building, Poplar Fruit was teaching a non-boring translation theory class to the students. At the end of this class, I'll leave you with a small question. For literary translation from Chinese to English, China's famous translator, Mr. Yang Xianyi, once said that translators should try their best to be faithful to the image of the original text, neither exaggerating nor mixing in anything else. However, his wife, Ms. Dai Nadi, believes that translators should be more creative. For example, for the translation of four-word idioms, Dai Nadi believes that there are two ways to translate them. One is to add some words that are not in the original text, and the other is to add footnotes. Then here comes the question. Poplar Fruit paused. Immediately, a student chuckled softly and asked a popular internet phrase, which school has the best excavator skills? Haha. Poplar Fruit and the others laughed knowingly. Poplar Fruit waved his hand and smiled. Okay, since you brought it up, I will remember to ask you how to translate this sentence and its problems in the next class. Don't blame me for not telling you to prepare. If I knew this would happen, I wouldn't have caused trouble. The student's face immediately turned bitter. He knew that Poplar Fruit would definitely not let him go in the next class because he forgot. Since he said the next class, he would definitely ask him to translate in the next class. Don't underestimate this short sentence. It seemed to be easy to translate. However, in the field of literary translation, not only did they have to consider the complete translation of the original text, they also had to consider how to vividly express the sentence which company has the best excavator technology. Look for Lanxiang in Shandong, China. If it was just a random translation, Poplar Fruit, who had high expectations for class results, would definitely not let him go. Poplar Fruit continued, Mr. Yang and his wife's ideas can be said to represent the two major schools of translation theory, literal translation and free translation. Of course, I don't want everyone to think about how the couple fought. The students laughed. I want everyone to think about a question from the perspective of a foreign reader after class. In the translation of four-word idioms, which theory is more comfortable for the reader to read? Poplar Fruit smiled and put down the chalk in his hand. He then clapped his hands and said, "Okay, class is over. See you next week." Teacher, I have a question. Poplar Fruit just picked up the laptop next to him. Immediately, a few students surrounded him and discussed with Poplar Fruit the problems they encountered in their translation practice. This was a situation that Poplar Fruit encountered every time in class. Once they talked, it would take more than 20 to 30 minutes. Of course, he was also happy to have an academic discussion with these students with good potential. However, he did not stop and led these students to the corridor outside. 10 minutes later, there would be other teachers in the classroom. Poplar Fruit could not delay the other teachers' and students' classes. However, today, Poplar Fruit's academic discussion was doomed to be unable to continue because there was a person standing there waiting for him at the door. It should be said that there were a lot of people. The bodyguard stopped him, and there were many students behind him who were taking photos with their mobile phones. Poplar Fruit, "Hello, I'm Wang Shitsong." The person came up and smiled at Poplar Fruit, who was in a daze. Then, he shrugged and asked, "There are too many people now. How about we find a place to talk?" Wang Shitsong? Looking for me? Poplar Fruit was indeed a little confused. He was sure that he had nothing to do with this young master in front of him. However, he was a guest, and he did not seem to have any malicious intentions. Poplar Fruit was puzzled, but he smiled and nodded. Chapter 1097. The nation's husband mysteriously appeared at Yangcheng University just to see Poplar Fruit. Various media outlets on the internet were already reporting on this, and some of them even quoted how Poplar Fruit and Kiki's huge fanbase called Poplar Fruit the nation's father-in-law, creating a battle between the nation's husband and the nation's father-in-law. Don't tell me he wants to marry our adorable Princess Kiki. No. Many of Kiki's fans were already imagining this scene, and yelled angrily. Of course, this was impossible. No matter how cute and beautiful Kiki was, she was still my daughter who had just turned 3. Moreover, if Wang Shitsong dared to make such a request, Poplar Fruit would definitely beat him up so badly that even his rich dad wouldn't be able to recognize him. At this moment, in the private room of a high-class restaurant near Higoshiyama University, Poplar Fruit asked in shock, "What, you want to buy Le Dongjueyue?" "Yes." Wang Shitsong looked at Poplar Fruit with sincerity, and said, "I think Le Dongjueyue is a mobile game company with a lot of potential, and it's worth investing in." This was obviously nonsense, but it also showed his arrogance and confidence to a certain extent. Of course, the arrogance here was a compliment. After all, the company was worth hundreds of billions, which was why he used such a self-centered statement to announce his determination to buy the company. At the beginning of the year, Poplar Fruit had seen Le Dongjueyue's year-end report. He was a shareholder after all. Le Dongjueyue was no longer the poor company that had to lay off employees to survive. Using IMMT to make a name for themselves, Le Dongjueyue had grown into a company worth hundreds of millions after 2 years of development. Disregarding everything else, Xing Sanhu was known as a tycoon because of Le Dongjueyue's year-end bonus. However, Poplar Fruit really didn't care much about Le Dongjueyue. Other than a few times when he was the matchmaker between Le Dongjueyue and Blizzard, Poplar Fruit almost never asked about Le Dongjueyue's management. What he didn't know was that when Mercenary World went into open beta last year and was released at the beginning of this year, the industry was already discussing the listing of Le Dongjueyue. The industry estimated that if Le Dongjueyue were to be listed, they would be able to get 100 to 200 million in financing. Moreover, Wang Shitsong wasn't concerned about Le Dongjueyue's launch, but the IMMT2 that was currently in development and testing. It was rumored that the new version would have even more intricate 3D effects, and even more exciting gameplay. It was highly anticipated even before it was released. So, do you think this company is worth investing in? Wang Shitsong said with a smile. He didn't hide his thoughts at all. If I were to acquire Le Dongjueyue, I wouldn't let it get listed so quickly. I would invest more and develop more fun mobile games. Right, you've heard of Le 2 Games, right? Wang Shitsong saw Poplar Fruit shake his head in confusion. He passed his phone to Poplar Fruit and pointed at the games on the screen. Here, the games under this directory, Fruit Ninja, Angry Birds, and so on, Are all their games theirs? Poplar Fruit looked at Wang Shutsong suspiciously. Wang Shutsong laughed awkwardly and admitted, "All right, they're not theirs, but they're the general manager." In order to salvage the situation, Wang Shutsong said, "You've seen it for yourself. This company owns a lot of game right. Moreover, it will be listed in the US in 2 months. If Le Dongjue has my connections, I'm sure they'll be able to learn a lot from Le Chu Games, such as making other types of mobile games, or getting listed to make money." He didn't try to hide it, and directly used the word make money. However, Poplar Fruit didn't care about that. He asked curiously, "Mr. Wang, why are you telling me about Le Chu Games? Since you already have Le Chu Games, why do you still want to acquire Le Chu Games?" Wang Shutsong blushed and laughed. "Actually, Le Chu Games isn't mine. I only bought 3% of the shares. It's not much, not much." Yang Guo rolled her eyes. She knew that this young master couldn't make any money from Le Chu Games, so he set his sights on Liudong Joyo, which had more potential and was developing independently. "Poplar Fruit, don't call me Mr. Wang." Wang Shutsong tried to get close to him and smiled. "We're the same age, and I'm only a few months older than you. Call me Brother Wang." Poplar Fruit suddenly remembered his funny Weibo profile, a low-key internet celebrity, Little Wang. Just thinking about it made him want to laugh. "All right, Brother Wang, I want to ask, why are you looking for me to acquire Le Chu Games? The major shareholder is Uncle Hu, Third Tiger Xing. What's the point of buying my shares?" Poplar Fruit asked with a smile. "Third Tiger Xing doesn't want to sell it, so I can't do anything about it." Wang Shutsong frowned and said, "So, I can only look for you. I don't need the controlling shares. I just want to invest some money, and then when Third Tiger Xing gets the company listed, I'll make a profit from this investment." He didn't care how much he made. This investment was mainly for others to see, to prove that he, Wang Shutsong, wasn't stupid with too much money. He could make a lot of money. Poplar Fruit couldn't help but think. Wang Shutsong ran over to Poplar Fruit and sat down next to him. He smiled and said, "How about it? Poplar Fruit, think about it. Anyway, it's useless for you to have 20% of the shares. You can still get some money if you sell it. Isn't your charity fund almost out of money?" Poplar Fruit glanced at him. In fact, he didn't find it strange that Wang Shutsong knew so much about Poplar Fruit. The media had already exposed the matter of Le Dongjue's shares, and the charity fund's accounts were posted online. They were updated at any time, and anyone could see them. What he cared about was Wang Shutsong saying that the charity fund was almost out of money. Yes, the charity fund really didn't have much money left. Don't underestimate the amount of money that was close to 100 million. Apart from Poplar Fruit's money, there was also a lot of donations after the train station incident. In fact, it wasn't enough to spread out across the country. Moreover, the country wasn't as big as it was now. Because this year, after Poplar Fruit's news was broadcasted again, more officials learned about Poplar Fruit's charity work. There were already many provincial officials from Guishan Province and Xiangnan Province, who came to Guangdong Province to learn and seek support. Zheng Mingsheng also ordered Guangdong Province's Department of Education and Poplar Fruit's charity organization to start preparing. That was the long-distance teaching of 2 big provinces, compared to the small Liang city, who knew how many more poor students there were. If they waited until all the policies and funds were implemented during the summer vacation, then it was estimated that more than half of the students wouldn't be able to get the help of long-distance education in the next semester. Therefore, Poplar Fruit asked Fat Dragon and Cai Simon to start using the charity fund to prepare personnel and equipment. When the state's policies and funds were released, they could move more quickly. But now it seemed that the 100 million charity fund was just a drop in the bucket. Chapter 1098. Poplar Fruit was short of money now, really short of money. The 100 million in the fund account was about to be used up, and Poplar Fruit only had a few million left in his bank account. He wouldn't touch the Poplar Fruit because he wanted to save it for Fong Beibei's emergency use. Moreover, even if he threw in a few million, it would only be a drop in the bucket. However, Poplar Fruit wasn't in a hurry because last month's royalties were coming soon. He could still hold on for a while. If he really couldn't, he could borrow a few million from Zheng Yujie to get through it. Zheng Yujie just didn't know. If she knew, she might not even need to borrow and just put the money into his account. However, Poplar Fruit still didn't want to trouble Zheng Yujie unless it was absolutely necessary. Poplar Fruit owed this girl too much. He probably wouldn't be able to repay it even in his next life. If you're willing to sell, I'll ask my dad to donate 100 million to your charity fund in addition to the money used to buy the shares. Wang Shitsong once again threw out a trump card that was infinitely tempting to Poplar Fruit. In fact, the Wang family did a lot of charity activities every year. Doing charity meant throwing money into the water, and they might not even be able to get their reputation back. In that case, it didn't matter who he donated it to. Instead of donating it to the Red Cross Scourge, it was better to do something good for Poplar Fruit. Moreover, the charity that Poplar Fruit did was transparent and fair, and it was the focus of the whole country. This was many times better than the Red Cross. Poplar Fruit was silent for a moment. This time, he was really tempted, but Poplar Fruit couldn't give an answer immediately. I need to discuss it with my friends, Poplar Fruit said slowly. Poplar Fruit wasn't a businessman. If he was, he could make the decision himself, but he wasn't. There were many things he didn't understand, but Poplar Fruit had a lot of people he trusted. Wang Shitsong was a little disappointed, but he still had hope. Thus, he stood up and stretched out his hand with a smile. No problem, I'll stay in Yang City for a few days and wait for your reply. Okay. Poplar Fruit nodded and shook his hand. I'll contact you as soon as possible. Before leaving, Poplar Fruit took away the business card that had been placed on the table from the beginning. When he was talking to Xing Sanhu, Poplar Fruit had already divided the 20% shares into half for himself and half for Fong Beibei. Even though Fong Beibei was unwilling to take it back then, and even though Fong Beibei was now one of his people and Poplar Fruit was the head of the family, when faced with this kind of problem, Poplar Fruit still chose to discuss it with Fong Beibei first. I don't have any objections, uncle. You can make the decision yourself. Fong Beibei shook her head and smiled. I have an objection. Suddenly, a clear voice squeezed in. Poplar Fruit turned his head and looked at the troublemaking Kiki. He smiled and hooked his finger at her. Hee, Gold, run. Papa is angry. I'm going to spank you. Chichi laughed mischievously and ran upstairs with Gold to play with. I really want to sell it. Poplar Fruit scratched his head and said, but I'm a little worried if I'm being immoral. Fong Beibei stuck out her tongue and smiled. I don't understand. Why don't you ask Sister Yujie? She should know better. Poplar Fruit nodded and called Zhang Yujie. If you want to sell it, then sell it. What are you hesitating for? You're not involved in the game industry. What's the point of keeping a game company's shares? Zhang Yujie asked. Anyway, it's quite valuable now. If you sell it earlier, who knows when they'll suddenly lose money? Poplar Fruit said with a bitter smile. It's not good to curse others like that, right? I'm not lying. The mobile game market is too hot now, too many bubbles are inflating together, and many small companies are in a precarious situation. Who knows when they'll be swallowed up by the big fish? Zhang Yujie advised, it's good to sell it while it can still be sold. The problem is this really good? When Uncle who gave me the shares, it was because he trusted me. If I sell it rashly, wouldn't it be bad for him? Poplar Fruit asked doubtfully. You're too kind. Business is business, what's there to be conflicted about? Zhang Yujie sneered. Sigh, I really don't know what to do with you. Zhang Yujie shouted from the other end, just ask Xing Sanhu. If he doesn't mind you selling it, then sell it. If he does, then tell him that he can buy it back at 10% of the market price. 10%? Poplar Fruit scratched his head. Will Uncle who be willing? Yes, 10%. Didn't you just say it? Wang Shitsong is 8%. Plus 100 million in donations. Zhang Yujie snorted and said, we're giving him a chance to buy it back. If he's not willing, then we'll sell it to Wang Shitsong. Poplar Fruit hesitated for a moment, but still nodded. Zhang Yujie was right, 10% was already the best he could do. In comparison, Poplar Fruit had sacrificed a lot. Poplar Fruit didn't wait until the next day. After doing some research at night, he gave Xing Sanhu a call. Xing Sanhu was still working overtime. IMMT2 was about to be released. This was the most important project for Le Dongzhuiyue, and Xing Sanhu had to keep an eye on it. Poplar Fruit, I knew this day would come, Xing Sanhu smiled after listening to Poplar Fruit's explanation. To be honest, having a shareholder like Poplar Fruit was a blessing for Le Dongzhuiyue and Xing Sanhu. In this world, how many people could be like Poplar Fruit, taking 20% of the company's shares without interfering with the company's affairs, and even giving money and connections to help the company achieve success? No, people like that only existed in ancient times. That was called Maro Zedong. Xing Sanhu sighed, not because of Poplar Fruit's decision to sell the shares, but because it seemed like Le Dongzhuiyue was finally going to part ways with Maro Zedong. Sorry, Uncle Hu, I'm really short on money, Poplar Fruit said to Xing Sanhu regretfully, but if you don't want to, you can buy back the shares. Millimeter, just like Wang Shitsong, 8% above the market price would be fine. In the end, Yang Guo's heart softened. In the end, he couldn't bear to cheat his friend. No need, Xing Sanhu smiled, you can sell it to Wang Shitsong. Just like you said, Le Dongzhuiyue needs to develop further. A senior like Le Dongzhuiyue is someone Le Dongzhuiyue needs to learn from, isn't that right? The development of a company could not always be done by a single shareholder. It needed more say, financing, and technical support, so that it could improve faster and faster. In the past, Le Dongzhuiyue was a little timid, and Xing Sanhu let go of many opportunities, even better than Wang Shutsong's. But this time, Xing Sanhu decided to change. He didn't need a Maro Zedong like Poplar Fruit, he needed a wolf that could motivate the company to move forward. The next day, Wang Shutsong and Poplar Fruit reached an agreement. After signing the contract, Wang Shutsong patted Poplar Fruit's shoulder and said, Poplar Fruit, Brother Wang will remember this favor. From now on, we're brothers. On the third day, Wang Shutsong announced on Weibo that he had invested in Le Dongzhuiyue, and that the Wang family would donate 100 million RMB to the remote teaching charity fund. While the internet was discussing Wang Shutsong's investment, the mobile game industry was shocked. The wolf is here. Chapter 1099. Yang Guo's deal with Wang Shutsong had attracted a lot of attention on the internet, but he didn't have time to respond to the doubts about the rapid depletion of the remote teaching charity fund. It was only Wang Yubo who came forward on his behalf to resolve the storm. Where did Poplar Fruit go? He did not go anywhere. He just went back and forth between school and home. But he was so busy that even Zheng Yujie did not dare to disturb him. Feng Beibei also helped him with most of the housework. This was to give him more time to complete his research on the word disassembly method. In June, the research on the word splitting method was in its final stages. Yang Guo wasn't the only one who wanted to achieve this goal in one go. Even the old men from the Chinese language education research team, other than those who couldn't walk, all came to Yangcheng. Those who had connections as guest professors used their connections to temporarily stay at the school and teach for a few days. Those who did not have connections in Yangcheng, Higoshiyama University was happy to get all of these old men in one fell swoop. Well, it shouldn't have been so obvious. Instead, it should be said that Dongshan University sent out 2 vice principals and several leaders and professors in charge of the Chinese department to serve these old men well. Not only did they incite and persuade them, but they also managed to get 4 of these old men, who were national treasures, to become visiting professors at Dongshan University. This number was more than half of the research team. Before this, in the 21st century, Higoshiyama University only had 1 professor, Professor Yun, who had retired. Even if they were guest professors, they would only be here for less than a month. But with their connections, it was good. Furthermore, they lured these professors to sign the contract because Poplar Fruit would be studying Chinese at Higoshiyama University for the next few years. These professors were willing to be guest professors at Higoshiyama University because of Poplar Fruit. This meant that in the future, they would often visit Higoshiyama University and teach. This was a super rich gold mine for Higoshiyama University. She was a bit off topic, but under the guidance and supervision of the professors, Yang Guo's progress was very fast. She was about to finish writing. But today, Poplar Fruit received a call. It was a call from an old friend who had been missing for a long time. After the call, Poplar Fruit was as excited as a kid. He waved his fist and jumped back into the living room. Baby, at the end of next month, let's go to a movie in Beijing. Poplar Fruit wanted to pretend to be calm, but the smile on his face revealed his happiness. Kiki wants to go too. Kiki wants to go too. Although Poplar Fruit did not discuss with Kiki, the little girl was the most anxious to express her opinion. She threw away the storybook in her hand and jumped happily on the sofa. Kiki, of course, will go too. Poplar Fruit said with a smile. Why do we have to go to Beijing to watch a movie? Fong Beibei asked curiously as Kiki and Goldie cheered. Poplar Fruit said with a smile, Che and Juan, do you remember? I never thought that Zhu Baji had other characters in the movie. Oh, you said it before. Your friend. Fong Beibei nodded. However, Fong Beibei did not know how deep the relationship between Poplar Fruit and Che and Juan was. She only thought that they were ordinary friends. After all, Fong Beibei had not seen Che and Juan for more than a year. If they were really good friends, it wouldn't be too much for them to visit each other, right? Truth be told, Che and Juan couldn't be blamed. He did not have many relatives in Yangcheng City to begin with. Adding on to the fact that his acting career was booming, he was too busy to come back to Yangcheng City. He has a movie that will be released at the end of next month. Poplar Fruit smiled as he continued, so, he wants to invite me to the premiere. Is that good? He's in a movie. Fong Beibei was so shocked that her mouth curled up. It's a movie by a writer that you like. Poplar Fruit chuckled. Writer? You mean Xiao? No, I don't like Xiao Sai. Fong Beibei guessed as she spoke. Ah, uncle, you mean Han Han? Looking at Fong Beibei's surprised and expectant face, Poplar Fruit laughed and said, yeah, it's Han Han. The premiere of his movie? I can see Han Han. Fong Beibei was so happy that she almost fainted. Xiao Sai and Han Han were two of the most successful young writers in the new century. They had a great influence on the new generation of young writers in the 80s and 90s. They were even more influential than Mo Yang, who won the Nobel Prize in Literature. Fong Beibei was Han Han's fan. Poplar Fruit knew that long ago. Otherwise, why would Fong Beibei have so many of Han Han's works on her bookshelf? What kind of role does Che and Juan play in Han Han's movie? That movie is called Never See You Again, right? Fong Beibei counted with her fingers. She had been following Han Han's Weibo. Poplar Fruit nodded and smiled. Yes, Never See You Again. His role is called Lu. It's a very important supporting role. Che and Juan is so good. Fong Beibei exclaimed. He can actually act in a movie now. Che and Juan was indeed good. He had only debuted for 2 years, but he had jumped from web dramas to movies. First, he acted in Unexpectedly, and other web dramas released by Wan He. Then, he took the opportunity that Wan He gave him to act in 3 TV dramas. He slowly moved from a minor character to an important supporting role. Now, he was in Han Han's new movie. Although he was only a supporting role, who could say that he couldn't be the main character in the next movie? The most important thing was that Che and Juan wasn't an ungrateful guy. His current achievements had long surpassed the other actors and directors of Wan He. However, he still kept his contract with Wan He. When he didn't have any other schedule, he would come back to participate in some of Wan He's popular web dramas and micromovies. Not only that, Che and Juan's role as a supporting role also gave Bai Ku and other friends a chance to make cameo appearances. This was a rare opportunity for the entire Wan He to show his face. Now, he called Poplar Fruit to sincerely invite Poplar Fruit to attend the premiere of his first movie as a friend. He knew how to repay the favor. He didn't forget the support that Poplar Fruit had given him. Wan He didn't get involved in the movie industry. It can be said that this opportunity to take off was fought for by himself. He relied on his own ability. Poplar Fruit said with a smile, just based on his first report card after stepping into the entertainment industry, we have to go and see it. So I just asked him for 2 more seats. Our family will go. Poplar Fruit said with a smile. What about Sister Yujia? Didn't she also help a lot? Fong Beibei asked. Just now, Poplar Fruit said that Zheng Yujie helped one her Tianese actors find opportunities to act in TV dramas through her family. Don't worry about her. Poplar Fruit laughed and said, she will also go, but that's an invitation to one her Tiani. You don't have to worry. Chapter 1100. At Higoshiyama University, in the largest conference room of the foreign languages faculty, no one was sitting. Even Poplar Fruit, who had been typing on the computer for 4 hours, was not sitting down. It's finally done. A white-haired old professor held a stack of freshly printed manuscripts and sighed. He was not the only one. The 9 old professors present each had a stack of manuscripts in their hands. Because they had been typing for a month, their expressions were no longer excited. Instead, they were filled with endless emotion. This will be the future of Chinese culture. An old professor closed his eyes, and a turbid tear rolled out from the deep wrinkles in the corner of his eye. He could not help but sigh. Since the founding of China, many generations of scholars had worked tirelessly, but they had not been able to break the barrier between Chinese and the outside world. Although the Confucius Institute in this century was powerful, no one knew that it was actually the country that was losing money. However, after today, these difficulties would become a thing of the past. Because they had the word-splitting method, a butterfly's wing that could reverse the situation, a small theory, would completely change the status of Chinese in the international community. In the past, because of the difficulty of learning Chinese, the mystery of China, the gap between culture and system, many people who were eager to learn about China were unable to do so. Many Chinese students who were attracted by the propaganda returned in disappointment. Then, in the future, when Chinese became as easy to learn as English, would these once disappointing scenes appear in front of the world again? From passive promotion to letting people actively learn, how big of a difference would this be? The world was no longer an era of single-minded development. Globalization and diversity were the mainstream of the world. If it could not become one of the brightest pearls of cultural diversity, and become one of the trends that the world could accept and like, then Chinese would sooner or later be gradually eliminated because it could not keep up with the speed of development. Chinese culture, with a history of more than 5,000 years, did not deserve such treatment. One must know that when we were in the age of firearms, Europe and America were still eating raw meat and drinking blood in the dark. Not to mention, the country next to it originated from China. Such a small country could become one of the trends of the world's culture. Chinese culture was thousands of times more profound and wonderful. It was unjustifiable that it did not develop well. Of course, openness and tolerance were the secrets of the country's success, but it did develop its own culture to the extreme. Chinese culture could do it as well, because the word-splitting method would become a wedge for it to go global. The old professors here were all Chinese scholars, but they were not just Chinese scholars. Just like Great Master Ji back then, their research crossed national borders and often cooperated with top foreign universities. Naturally, they could acutely discover the value of the word-splitting method. Just like Xiong reform, Adam Smith's publication of The Wealth of Nations, and the birth of the first computer in the United States of America, the word-splitting method was not only epoch-making, but also the beginning of a language revolution. But today, it had finally been perfected and could be promoted in a comprehensive way. The old professors had suppressed the surging enthusiasm in their hearts for too long. It was not until today that everything was settled that they could vent it out without caring about their dignity. Oldly, let me see your copy. An old professor pushed the old professor who was crying and laughing like a child. What are you doing? Don't you have one in your hand too? He actually used his own body to protect it as if he was protecting a cub. Why are you reacting so strongly? Aren't we all different? I want to see the accuracy of sound you wrote at the end. The old professor patted his arm, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Don't waste time, hurry up and give it to me. Little Yang is still printing, but I can't wait. This time, Yang Guo used the word-splitting method based on the various perspectives of Chinese characters, including Wenyin chapter, pictographic chapter, imitated characters chapter, and so on. There were a total of 7 chapters and 11 sections, with a total of 1.2 million words. Now, The 9 old men only had the last 5 chapters and 9 sections in their hands. Poplar Fruit was still arranging for the school's assistant to print out the first chapter. But in fact, except for the last section, which was the one that Poplar Fruit spent 4 hours sorting out the scattered research data, the other 9 old men had already read it. So, in order to prevent the old men from fighting, Poplar Fruit asked his assistant to print out a few more copies of the last section for them. "I can't wait to see it publish," an old man murmured as he touched the A4 manuscript that still had the smell of the printer. Poplar Fruit walked in. When he heard this sentence, his eyes were also burning with passion. Who didn't want their work to be published? Who didn't want their work to be held in the hands of more people as treasures? Who didn't want their blood and sweat to go to the world and become the main force of cultural dissemination? Although this was something that was set in stone, Poplar Fruit's heart was still surging when he heard it. This would be Poplar Fruit's most important and valuable work since he entered the publishing industry. Although there would be countless names in the editorial team in the future, Poplar Fruit would definitely be placed as an author, and one of a kind. This was the first time Professor Yoon had given Yang Guo an affirmative answer during the first meeting. Otherwise, why would they give Poplar Fruit half a year to perfect this theory? Why would they only guide and supervise instead of personally participating in it? This was the love that the older generation had for Poplar Fruit, a junior worthy of their support and training. It can't be that fast, right? The publication needs to be reviewed first, right? An old professor poured cold water on the idea. He was relatively calm. Review what? Isn't that what we've been doing for the past 6 months? The old professor laughed and scolded. That's right, in the whole of China, which other experts and scholars were more qualified to take on the responsibility of reviewing? These 1.2 million words had been written by them, who had followed up and guided them closely. Did they still need someone else to review them? Maybe we need to find Chinese students and foreign Confucius institutes to conduct pilot teaching, but I believe this pilot will not take long. Professor Yuan Xinlin, who was the most qualified among the 9 people, walked up and gently patted Poplar Fruit's shoulder. He smiled and said, "At least 2 to 3 months, at most half a year. The country will not let your efforts go to waste. Also, we are very much looking forward to its release. We are very, very looking forward to it." Professor Yuan laughed. The other professors also smiled at Poplar Fruit. So, it's up to us now. Poplar Fruit could relax. He had completed the most important step of the research. The rest was up to the performance of the other national treasured professors with huge resources and channels. Chapter 1101. What was the most important thing in June of 2014? If someone said it was the NBA Finals, countless people would definitely spit on him. The NBA Finals were indeed very important, and all the Chinese fans, including Poplar Fruit, were eagerly watching the battles that represented the sharpest spear and the strongest shield. However, that was not the most important thing in June. That was because, in terms of global influence, basketball was far inferior to the magic of the black and white elf. That's right, it was the 2014 World Cup in Brazil. It was a grand event for billions of fans around the world. It was broadcasted live on dozens of national television stations around the world. Tens of thousands of media outlets and reporters rushed to Brazil to report. Tens of millions of rich fans gathered in Brazil, and the heat of the samba would ignite the passion of the world. Nothing could stop the fans from going crazy for this grand event. Even if they had only made it to the World Cup once in history, and even if the national pig was scolded badly, the enthusiasm of the Chinese fans did not diminish. As early as the beginning of June, the sports channels of the major TV stations had already begun intensive coverage. Even CCTV's Let's Talk had invited the former football superstar, the eternal heartthrob Beckham, as a guest. In the show, Beckham talked about his dreams and the importance of his family in his career. He even called his family the key to him getting out of the trough when he was a player. Later on, Beckham still showed his side of being a fan of his daughter. "My greatest success came from my family and my children. I know everyone is very supportive of them. They are all playing football now, and I am very proud of it. My daughter, little Seven. I know everyone likes little Seven very much. She is a very cute little girl, just like my son. Of course, there is also Victoria. Poor 3 sons. Their combined weight was not as good as little Seven's. His son only said 1 sentence, but his daughter was full of praise. When she said it, the smile on her face was like a blooming chrysanthemum. Brooklyn and the others don't have any objections. Watching the television, Poplar Fruit looked at Beckham sitting on the sofa next to him and said with a smile. Yes, Beckham appeared in Beijing 2 days ago to record a show and conduct some business activities, then came to Guangzhou. Everyone knew about Beckham's schedule. But no one knew that Beckham had run over last night and hid in Poplar Fruit's house. Then, he dragged Poplar Fruit to watch the game early in the morning. Not only that, but he also took a selfie with Poplar Fruit and uploaded it to his INS. He showed off and said, "Hey, I'm watching the NBA Finals with my superhero brother. Does anyone want to join me?" Aside from having a business event in Guangzhou tomorrow, Beckham also wanted to pay a visit to Poplar Fruit. After Poplar Fruit became a world-famous hero at the beginning of the year, he had called Poplar Fruit several times to praise him. Unfortunately, he was a busy man and had no choice. Of course, Beckham didn't come alone today. In the afternoon, Victoria would bring her 3 sons and little Seven to Guangzhou. Among them, Victoria and Beckham had to attend a business event, and little Seven had to come over to play with his good friend Kiki. As for the 3 sons who were too lazy to travel around the world with their father, they were all here for Poplar Fruit. What's the point of having opinions? Beckham took a sip of beer and winked at Poplar Fruit. He smiled and said, "The daughter is the father's lover in the previous life, isn't that right?" Yang Guo laughed involuntarily and asked, "How do you know this sentence?" "Hihi, there are many Chinese among my fans." Beckham smiled slyly. Beckham waved his hand and said to Poplar Fruit, "Why are you watching this show? Didn't you say you wanted to watch the game? Hurry up, if I didn't come to China, I would want to watch the finals live." Poplar Fruit smiled and transferred him to CCTV 5. Although Beckham didn't understand Chinese, Poplar Fruit didn't intend to teach him the same language. He would just have to put up with it. Today was the 9th, 5 days before the start of the World Cup. Beckham, who was busy making money in China, naturally couldn't pay attention to the NBA Finals. He wouldn't leave China until the last day to go to Brazil to watch the World Cup. "Leon, are you really not coming with us to Brazil?" Beckham asked. "I still have a few tickets here. You can watch any game you want." Poplar Fruit reluctantly looked away from Beckham's hand and sighed. He shook his head and said, "I'm sorry, David. I can't leave because I have something to do. You know, the remote teaching activity I did. Now that the national policy was out, it was directly promoted by the Central Committee of the Chinese Communist Youth League called Project Dawn. Perhaps it was because Poplar Fruit casually mentioned it to the #1 leader at the time. This big move was bigger than Poplar Fruit previously estimated. Not only Guangdong Province, but several large provinces and municipalities with strong educational resources, such as Shanghai, Beijing, Jiangnan, were mobilized to encourage college students to volunteer to join the public welfare activities of teaching in poor mountainous areas. As for the provinces that benefited, other areas of Guishan Province, the Daliangshan area of Chuan Province, and the 73 poor counties of Zhejiang Province were in the first batch of pilot operations. There would definitely be more in the future. This time, the country really put in a lot of effort to support the remote teaching activity. Not only did the government allocate money to fully equip the teaching equipment, but it also asked the education department below to provide manpower and material support. Moreover, the students from various universities who participated in this public welfare activity would receive funds and honor as reward. Judging from this scale, what was the difference between this and the educated youth movement in the past? Even if the number of people might not be comparable, the difference was not too big. Of course, there was still a difference. In the past, the young students were forced to go to the mountains, but this time, it was a public welfare activity, a voluntary activity, and there was no coercion. In addition to the use of high-tech, remote teaching solved the limitations of time and space. It could mobilize the volunteer enthusiasm of the young students, and it could bring real change to the poor mountainous areas. In terms of effect and meaning, remote teaching was definitely much more than in the past. Of course, the involvement of the country also made remote teaching a political color. Moreover, the Remote Teaching Public Welfare Association led by Poplar Fruit in Guangdong Province's universities also felt a little like a mere figurehead. However, this change was gratifying, because more people would benefit from remote teaching. Wasn't this the purpose of Poplar Fruit's promotion of remote teaching? Since the country was here, what else did Poplar Fruit and his partners need to do? No, Poplar Fruit still needed to do a lot. He no longer needed to work hard in the mountains, but he needed to lead his team to pass on his experience and methods to more staff members. He needed to tour the universities in the country to give lectures and spread the seeds of the public welfare spirit of remote teaching. Perhaps in the future, Poplar Fruit would not lead a larger scale of remote teaching reform or even further evolution. Perhaps in the future, Poplar Fruit only needed to do teaching and research activities in English teaching. Perhaps in the future, Poplar Fruit only needed to lead a small team to be responsible for the education and development of Xiong village, which he had always been concerned about. But now, Poplar Fruit was very important. Chapter 1102. Uncle David. Beckham came very late last night, so Chichi didn't know. When she woke up, she was carried downstairs by Fang Beibei with sleepy eyes. When she found Beckham sitting in the living room, she screamed and cheered. Kiki wasn't old enough to chase after celebrities, and she didn't scream for Beckham. If she did, Poplar Fruit would chase Beckham out with a broom. She only had one goal. After getting down from Fang Beibei's arms, Chichi ran around energetically and searched for Beckham. In the end, she ran in front of Beckham and asked pitifully and disappointedly, "Uncle David, where's little Seven?" Fang Beibei was a lot more reserved in front of the world's superstar. Yesterday, she even stuttered when greeting him, and today, she hid beside Poplar Fruit. She wasn't as bold and natural as Kiki. Fang Beibei, who understood Kiki's simple English, pulled Poplar Fruit's sleeve timidly when she saw Kiki's impudent behavior. "It's okay." Poplar Fruit patted Fang Beibei's arm and said with a smile, "We're familiar with him. My cute little princess. Do you miss little Seven?" Beckham stood in front of little Chichi, placed one hand in front of his body, and bowed slightly. He made a handsome gentleman's bow and asked with a charming smile. Unfortunately, Kiki didn't buy it. She only thought about little Seven. She nodded and said, "Yes, little Seven is my good friend. I didn't even know you were here. Little Seven is so naughty." She didn't tell her sister. "Haha, okay. Little Seven isn't naughty. She wanted to give you a surprise." Beckham waved his hand when he saw Kiki starting to search again. "But she's not here yet. She'll arrive in Yangcheng in about 4 hours. Then. Kiki thought for a while and looked up at Beckham. "Then what are we waiting for? Hurry up and pick up little sister little Seven. My papa has a car. He can drive us. Well, he can also pick up Xiao Qi." Beckham looked at Shishi and then at the NBA finals that were being broadcast on TV. His expression became conflicted. "Kiki, don't worry." Poplar Fruit walked up and rubbed Kiki's head. He smiled and said, "There are still 4 hours left. You don't have to wait there so early. Then, what if little sister little Seven comes early? Will the plane arrive earlier?" Kiki asked worriedly with drooping eyebrows. Beckham raised his eyebrows slightly. He didn't know that Kiki knew so much at such a young age. Poplar Fruit laughed and said, "How can that be? The plane in this world will only be later, not earlier." However, since they were already up, Poplar Fruit still wanted to see the porridge he had cooked. Flour crab and pumpkin porridge was definitely Kiki's favorite breakfast. However, Poplar Fruit rarely made it recently because he was too busy some time ago. He didn't have time to buy crab to make porridge in the morning. Today, Kiki benefited from Beckham's help. A large pot full of large flour crabs, each weighing half a catty, were all split open and thrown in to cook. The porridge that was cooked out, the pumpkin and crab meat were boiled to a pulp. The golden pumpkin and white rice porridge, together with the flour crabs, was also a delicious dish that looked, smelled, and tasted good. Poplar Fruit turned off the fire. Fong Beibei walked in and opened the cupboard to take the tableware. She said, "Uncle, go back and watch the game with Beckham. I don't speak the language, so it's awkward to sit there. Besides, don't all men like to watch the game?" Fong Beibei's thoughtfulness made Poplar Fruit very happy. He kissed Fong Beibei and returned to the living room. In the living room, Beckham was staring at the ball intently. Shishi, on the other hand, was restless. She shifted around, sometimes looking at the ball, sometimes looking out the window. Perhaps her heart had already flown to the plane that was still in the sky. Seeing Poplar Fruit sit down, Beckham seemed to have found someone to talk to. He asked, "Leon, do you think James can lead the Heat to a third consecutive championship? This is the rise of another dynasty after Jordan. It's very difficult, isn't it?" Poplar Fruit frowned and said, Finally, he talked about something he knew better. Just now, during the talk, the host asked Beckham about his prediction of the World Cup semifinals. Beckham's opinion was England, Brazil, Argentina, and Spain. Admittedly, England was Beckham's own country, and there was nothing wrong with supporting it. However, most of the countries on this list were traditional football powerhouses. There were also some countries that Poplar Fruit liked more. England's Poplar Fruit was not prepared to argue with Beckham, but Poplar Fruit felt that Brazil was not strong enough. Spain was also a little lethargic this year. "I think the champion England will be Germany." Poplar Fruit simply made his own guess. He chose the German team for no other reason than because this team had both offense and defense. It had the most balanced and stable fighting power and was likely to be able to go on. However, Beckham's criticism of Poplar Fruit's choice was also very reasonable. The German team was stable, but they did not have as strong an impact as Argentina's Messi, Portugal's Cristiano Ronaldo, and Brazil's Neymar. One had to know that on the football field, scoring goals was the only philosophy. Even if the balance of offense and defense was very good, it was easy to be directly swallowed up by a team with strong offensive power. As for the lethargic West Country, didn't they still have Saint Cossi? Well, Poplar Fruit did not dabble much in football, but Poplar Fruit considered himself a die-hard basketball fan. He also liked to play with his classmates in school. As for this year's NBA Finals, Poplar Fruit more approved of the Spurs, who were also terrifyingly stable, than the Heat, who came with the power of 3 consecutive championships. "I think the Spurs have a higher chance of winning," Poplar Fruit said with a smile. "How can that be?" Beckham did not agree. He shook his head as he watched the game and said, "This year's Spurs are basically no different from last year's Spurs. David, you have to look at the development," Poplar Fruit said with a smile. "Think about how difficult it was for the Heat to win against the Spurs last year. The Spurs players are very healthy this year, and Leonard is more mature. This year's Heat is not optimistic. They only have one James, and Wade's strength has been greatly reduced, let alone Bosch." Wow. Beckham's cheers interrupted Poplar Fruit's explanation. It turned out that Fong Beibei had already brought the flour crab pumpkin porridge over. She saw Poplar Fruit and the others chatting enthusiastically, so she directly brought the porridge to the coffee table. Eat breakfast." Fong Beibei stammered in English. She lacked practice in speaking, and it was difficult for her to speak simple words. Thank you. What a beautiful porridge. I believe it must be delicious." "Thank you very much for your hospitality," Beckham said with a smile. "This is flour crab porridge. Crab. It's very delicious." Kiki struggled out of her father's arms. Her eyes were already as bright as the morning sun outside the window. She explained to Beckham while holding her small bowl and waiting. "It's very delicious." Beckham took the large bowl of porridge that Fong Beibei had scooped for him. He could not wait to taste it. He immediately praised loudly, "No, I have to take a picture first. This is a combination of art and food." Of course, this porridge was cooked by the great chef, Poplar Fruit. Chapter 1103. "I have to say, your prediction is really bad." Beckham's demonic laughter almost overturned the car. "David, if you don't want everyone to find out that you're in my car, please close the window and shut your mouth," Poplar Fruit was depressed and said angrily, "Of course, they were not arguing. They were just joking." Today, in the second game of the NBA Finals, the Heat actually turned the tables, and the key three-pointer in the end was made by Bosch, who Poplar Fruit thought was not good enough. This was a slap in the face. Otherwise, why would Beckham laugh at Poplar Fruit for an hour without stopping? Beckham's family was a big group of people. Besides them, there was also Victoria's assistant, makeup artist, and so on. Fortunately, the organizer of the commercial event had already sent a few luxury cars to pick them up. When the time came, Poplar Fruit only needed Fong Beibei's beetle to invite Beckham's family to his house. At night, Beckham's family should be going back to the hotel. Beckham's agent had already booked the hotel, but Beckham did not go there yesterday. However, from Brooklyn's intentions, it seemed that they wanted to get closer to Poplar Fruit, so it was uncertain if they would stay. Although Beckham's family came with a big group of people, it seemed that they did a good job of keeping it a secret. The airport did not have a sea of people. "Wrap your clothes properly and be careful to keep your head down," Poplar Fruit nagged. Fong Beibei held Kiki's hand and listened to Kiki's soft translation. She covered her mouth and giggled. "Leon, please, the weather in Guangzhou is very hot." Beckham breathed through his scarf. He was dressed as a Middle Eastern man, so Victoria probably would not recognize him. Poplar Fruit rolled his eyes and said, "Who told you to have so many tattoos on your body? Even on your neck? China is more conservative. With so many tattoos, you're like a third wheel in the dark. Even if you wear sunglasses, you'll still attract attention." Just as the two were laughing and arguing, Xiao Qi's plane finally arrived. "Daddy." This was little Seven's cheer when she saw Beckham. Beckham had already taken off her scarf. She let out a clear cry and rushed over, hanging it on her father's body. Then, he couldn't go down anymore. As long as Beckham was around, little Seven wouldn't walk. Little Seven. Kiki also let her father carry her up so that she could get Xiao Qi. She giggled and said, "I missed you so much. You finally came to my house to play. Sister Kiki, I missed you too." Little Seven reached out her hands and hugged Kiki. My daughter and little Seven held each other's hands and didn't want to let go. They even laughed loudly and were extremely happy. "Victoria, little Seven has grown up a lot." Poplar Fruit greeted Victoria. "Hey, that's right. She has also become a little fat girl." Victoria complained to Poplar Fruit. "She doesn't want to eat less. It's all because David spoils her." "Uncle, let's leave first. Let's talk about it when we get home. It seems that Beckham has been discovered by everyone." Fong Beibei tugged at Poplar Fruit's clothes and said to him. Fong Beibei found that it was very difficult for her to integrate into the conversation between Poplar Fruit and Beckham's family. She couldn't even understand what they were saying. However, Kiki was able to communicate with them fluently, which made her a little depressed. "I have to learn English later and ask Uncle to teach me. Even if I don't know how to write, I have to practice speaking well." Fong Beibei secretly made up her mind. "Victoria, this is my wife, my fiancée. You can call her Betty." Poplar Fruit smiled and introduced Fong Beibei and Victoria. Then, he relayed Fong Beibei's worries. Victoria was experienced and knowledgeable. With a wave of her hand, a group of people under the protection of bodyguards left in a grandiose manner. They didn't stay any longer and escaped before the crowd at the airport surrounded them. "That's Beckham," a passenger muttered as he held a Coke and stared at their backs in a daze. He even forgot to bite the straw as he muttered to himself. "Yes. Why is he here?" His friend next to him was also dizzy and couldn't accept the fact for a moment. Beckham walked past me and I actually forgot to ask for his autograph." Finally, he came back to his senses and wailed miserably. In the airport, who knew how many people were howling like him because they missed the opportunity to get close to their idol. Regardless of that, Poplar Fruit and the rest had already left the airport as planned and returned home. Due to the late publicity from the passengers, the domestic media began to stir. Xiao Bei's arrival in Guangzhou wasn't strange. After all, the commercial activity had already started long ago. However, the popular Xiao Qi also came to China. That was big news. Not only that, but Xiao Bei's family also came. And when they quoted the foreign media's report on Beckham's INS, people were surprised to find out that Beckham had stayed at Poplar Fruit's home yesterday. In fact, the good relationship between Poplar Fruit and Beckham was old news. Last year, the two families watched Frozen together in Ba Li was reported. And this year, because Frozen was well received in China, this news was picked up again to hype it up. Kiki, Xiao Qi, and Princess Givenchy's duet made many people fall over. Regarding the news that Beckham was playing at Poplar Fruit's home, Poplar Fruit's fans were naturally proud and didn't make a fuss about it. However, for many fans who didn't know the situation, it was quite eye-catching. On the way back, Fong Beibei drove Victoria, Xiao Qi, and Kiki in a Beetle. Poplar Fruit and the group of men sat in a Land Rover. In the car, Brooklyn couldn't sit still. He excitedly clung to the front seat and asked happily, "Leon, Superman, are you really Superman?" "No, Uncle Leon is Wolverine. He has knives in both hands." Ha, ha. Cruz, who was less than 10 years old, also became a fan of Poplar Fruit because of the video of Poplar Fruit defeating the knife-wielding thugs. See. Beckham shook his head and sighed. "My 3 children have always wanted to come to China because you became a superhero. I'm not. I like Uncle Leon because of Uncle Leon's novels." Romeo, who was a little quiet, said, 9 Chinese dragons pulling a coffin through the universe. My God, this scene is so magnificent. It's even more wonderful than Harry Potter. It makes my blood boil. Uncle Leon, how did you come up with such a scene? There is actually a little fan of the online novel translation launched by New Translation Road Publishing House. Poplar Fruit was a little surprised. He laughed and said, "Romeo, you have to know, I'm just a translator. I translated Shrouding the Heavens. The author is a webwriter named Chen Dong. Have you seen the other book I translated, Tomb of God? That was also written by him." "Wow, the super beautiful Tomb of God was also written by him? Uncle Leon, can you help me get his autographed book? Many of my friends like his books." Romeo cried excitedly. "Look at you." Brooklyn pulled Romeo down and took his place. He smiled and said, "Uncle Leon, can you teach me kung fu? I also want to be like you, a master who can fight against 8 people. I want it too, I want it too, I want to be Uncle Leon's disciple." Cruz cried. "You've lost all your integrity." Beckham covered his face. Chapter 1104. Little 7, I asked Papa to leave some delicious flour crab and pumpkin porridge for you. In the car, Kiki and Little 7 continued to chat. Seeing her little friend whom she hadn't seen for more than half a year, Kiki naturally had a lot to say. "Is it really delicious?" Little 7 looked at Kiki with admiration and asked curiously, "I'm so hungry." Little 7's admiration for Kiki had been long-standing. When she was a little girl, she felt that Kiki was very knowledgeable. Now, she often pestered Kiki to tell her stories. In fact, the difference between the two was only a few months. "It's really delicious. My papa said that he'll make more delicious food for you later. Seafood feast, red prawns, fragrant fish," Kiki said excitedly. Little 7 listened and couldn't stop drooling. Poplar Fruit didn't let them down. They really made a sumptuous seafood feast for the Becks. The seafood was bought with the flour crab in the morning, which cost a few thousand yuan. It could be said that there was no other place where Poplar Fruit could make such a sumptuous meal. Even the big hotels didn't make Poplar Fruit's dishes as beautiful and delicious. For example, the soy sauce squid rolls, this dish required a chef's knife skills. Ordinary people could only make a taste, but Poplar Fruit cut the squid into various shapes of small animals, which made people reluctant to eat. Not to mention the classic Chinese seafood feast such as vermicelli scallops and oil-consuming abalones, even the palm-sized prawns and Poplar Fruit could be made into a French feast. Each person had a plate of cheese-baked prawns, which was so delicious that Brooklyn wanted to swallow his tongue. Don't think that 1 prawn per person was too little, because there were other dishes. Didn't you see Little 7 crying while eating? "Woo-woo, I'm full, but I still want to eat." Everyone couldn't help but laugh. After he finished eating, Brooklyn howled in pain. Oh, no. I forgot to take a picture. The smell was so tempting that he couldn't even bear to put down his chopsticks. How could he remember to take a picture? Haha, you loser. Beckham proudly waved his phone and said, when I sneaked into the kitchen, I already took a picture and uploaded it. During this time, Poplar Fruit's phone kept ringing. Many media outlets who had interviewed Poplar Fruit before wanted to approach him, but Poplar Fruit politely rejected them. Later, Poplar Fruit simply turned off his phone. Thanks to the security guards in the neighborhood, the reporters didn't break in. Poplar Fruit's house wasn't small. Of course, it paled in comparison to Beckham's. It was a small house compared to a big house. However, Beckham's family didn't seem to mind. He had eaten too much and needed to digest the food. Kiki and Little Seven played with Goldie. Goldie was already a big golden retriever, but it was docile and obedient. It wasn't scary at all. It looked furry and beautiful. Even Little Seven boldly hugged Goldie's neck and affectionately played with it. The little book fan Romeo went into Poplar Fruit's study and flipped through the books translated by Poplar Fruit. Brooklyn and Cruz pulled Poplar Fruit to his practice room to do some men's things. Master. The two of them unexpectedly knelt down together. Poplar Fruit didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he helped them up and asked, "What are you doing? Where did you learn this?" "Kung Fu Panda. That's what Po did." Cruz revealed. "Uncle Leon, teach us Kung Fu. We also want to be Superman." Brooklyn looked at Poplar Fruit with fanatical eyes and said, "No, it's to become Wolverine." Cruz corrected. Looking at Beckham, who was laughing at the side, Poplar Fruit said with a wry smile, "Why do you have such thoughts? Kung Fu isn't like what you see in the movies. Practicing Kung Fu is very difficult." Poplar Fruit explained a little about the difficult practice of Kung Fu. The two boys were not afraid and said, "We also practice football every day. How can we shrink back just because of a little hardship?" Hearing this, Beckham on the side curled his lips. Well, Poplar Fruit couldn't refuse, so he let them stand in the horse stance for the shortest time of 20 minutes to test them. The results were predictable. Cruz couldn't even stand for 2 minutes. Brooklyn held on for 5 minutes and fell to the ground crying. When you practice Kung Fu, what do you want to do the most in your heart? Poplar Fruit squatted on the side, pressed down on their thighs, and helped them gently massage to eliminate muscle fatigue. Brooklyn answered without hesitation, "I want to become more handsome, like Uncle Leon. In England, there are many girls who want to give birth to monkeys, children for you." Cruz also nodded in agreement. Well, these two brats were only learning Kung Fu to act cool and handsome. When did they really want to learn Kung Fu? This was easier. Poplar Fruit thought about it and taught them a few ultra-simplified moves of Wing Chun. Poplar Fruit deleted some of the difficult and small movements, leaving only the big and cool movements, and then integrated some of the gorgeous Kung Fu moves in the movies to teach them. They didn't learn that quickly. Brooklyn directly took out his phone and recorded Poplar Fruit's explanation of the moves, so he could go back and slowly study it. "This Kung Fu just looks cool. It can't make you Superman." Poplar Fruit waved his hand and smiled, "Don't use it to bully others. Be careful not to get beaten up so badly that even David can't recognize you." Brooklyn excitedly nodded and said, "No problem, I don't want to be Superman either. That's too tiring. With this Kung Fu, there will definitely be many beauties who will fall for me. Hey, kid, I don't want you to become a playboy." Beckham walked up and slapped him on the back of the head. They didn't eat at home that night. Although Poplar Fruit's cooking skills were comparable to international chefs, since they were in Yangcheng, how could Poplar Fruit let them stay at home? He decisively brought Beckham and his family to the top-floor restaurant of Yangcheng City's most beautiful restaurant. The expensive Western food at the top-floor restaurant wasn't as good as Poplar Fruit's, but Poplar Fruit and the rest weren't eating the food, but the feelings. They were enjoying the night view of Yangcheng City. As Poplar Fruit expected, at night, Little Seven was reluctant to part with Kiki. He cried and refused to go back to the hotel with Beckham and Victoria. However, Beckham and the others were going to attend a business event tomorrow. Later, Beckham had no choice but to leave the three brothers and Little Seven at Poplar Fruit's house. The next day, The bad poplar fruit took Brooklyn to play basketball. He wanted to take revenge for the abuse he suffered in B.A. Lee. Romeo and Cruz clearly supported poplar fruit. Little Seven initially supported his brother, but then he was fascinated by poplar fruit's elegant hands. He immediately changed his position and waved at Kiki and loudly cheered for poplar fruit. Brooklyn, who used to beat poplar fruit in football, was in a real tragedy this time. Poplar fruit's basketball skills were strong, and with his physical fitness, it was easy for him to beat Brooklyn. Later, Brooklyn was beaten by poplar fruit until he was in a trance. Even later, when he was signing autographs for the onlookers, Brooklyn was frowning as if he had been taken advantage of. In fact, Beckham was still very busy. He still had to go to Hong Kong to attend a business event, so they had to take the high-speed train to leave at night. Dad, Uncle Leon is a big demon. When Beckham and the others came back to pick up the 4 siblings, Brooklyn complained to Beckham with tears and snot running down his face. However, Beckham didn't pay attention to Brooklyn's fragile little heart, because Little Seven, who was sitting on his strong right arm, was happily telling Beckham about the fun he had with Kiki. Xiao Bei was all smiles as he nodded his head in agreement. Daddy, let's come and play with big sister Chichi next time, okay? Little Seven shook her beautiful golden braid that was the same as Chichi's and giggled. No. Brooklyn weakly turned his head and protested, but he was quickly pushed away by Beckham. Chapter 1105. Beckham left, but the influence of his stay was still there. In addition to the reporters that popped up from time to time, when poplar fruit went to school, teachers and students would run to poplar fruit to ask for his autograph. Beckham was the same. When he was interviewed by reporters abroad, there would be a few questions about his relationship with poplar fruit. Unlike poplar fruit, Beckham would not avoid the reporter's interview. He smiled and said that his family and poplar fruit's family were very good friends. Little Seven likes Leon's daughter, Kiki, very much. She is really cute, like Little Seven, a very beautiful little angel. For the sake of sister Chichi, Little Seven was even willing to give up her closest and most handsome father. Oh, I'm so sad. Beckham pretended to be sad. Leon is a very good person. His study is like a library, full of books. Romeo likes it very much. When he came back, he wanted me to buy him a lot of books. Brooklyn and the others, as you can see, they all admire Leon's kung fu very much. Beckham shook his head and smiled. Oh, yes. Leon is a very interesting friend because his guesses about the NBA Finals and the World Cup are wrong, haha. The semester was not over yet, and the World Cup had just started, but poplar fruit had already begun to worry. Because Kiki had reached the age where she could enter a kindergarten. Poplar fruit did not want to find a kindergarten for Kiki before because he thought that his own training would be more effective for Kiki. But now he had some changes in his thinking. On the one hand, poplar fruit would be very busy next semester because he had a university lecture tour. He might need to fly around the country. Even Higoshiyama University had cancelled poplar fruit's public elective course, leaving only a professional elective course in Swedish. This was to give poplar fruit more time to plan his speech. Fong Beibei also needed to take care of the pet hospital. Her own courses doomed her to not spend much time with Kiki during the day. In the past, Grandma Chen could help take care of him, but this was not a long-term solution. Poplar fruit's parents had also mentioned that they could help take care of Kiki, but both poplar fruit and Fong Beibei felt that it had deviated from poplar fruit's original intention of not letting Kiki attend kindergarten. After all, the older generation's teaching of children was not scientific and energetic enough. On the other hand, Kiki also had such a request. Although the little fellow was still sticking to poplar fruit as usual, she was also eager to meet more friend. Didn't you see that after Little Seven left, the little guy was depressed for a long time? Sometimes, kindergartens were not only children's education or nursery, but also a preparation or buffer zone for primary school. Children who grew up with their parents, like pearls in their palms, needed a place like this to learn how to get along well with children of the same age, and learn how to communicate politely with teachers who were older than them but not their parents. Although many parents now regarded kindergartens as a starting line booster for their children, in the education concept of foreign countries, Kindergartens were a small society for children to learn the basics of how to conduct themselves in society. Although Poplar Fruit was born in the countryside and had a somewhat traditional father, he was not pedantic. After reading a lot of Western literature, Poplar Fruit's thinking was somewhat inclined towards the Western model. It was reasonable to say that a child like Kiki, who was born with a high IQ, would be taught English at 1 year old, ancient poetry at 2 years old, painting at 3 years old, piano at 4 years old. After the whole Chinese style of force-feeding education, the child would probably be able to fly by the age of 10. However, Poplar Fruit did not. All the knowledge that Kiki knew was not deliberately or forced by Poplar Fruit to learn it. Poplar Fruit would create a very good atmosphere for Kiki, but he would not rush the seedlings to help them grow. Instead, he chose to let Kiki slowly improve under the influence of others. Compared to knowledge education, Poplar Fruit was more inclined towards personality education. Therefore, at home, Poplar Fruit would preach to Kiki some bad habits that Kiki inadvertently learned. Then, he would tell Kiki some short philosophical stories from ancient and modern times, so that she would gradually accept some traditional moral spirit as she listened to the stories. Therefore, in terms of kindergarten selection, Poplar Fruit did not intend to let Kiki go to kindergarten that was very good in the eyes of modern Chinese parents. This also meant that Poplar Fruit directly gave up the house that he bought at a high price and the various good degrees that covered it. It was also because of this that Poplar Fruit had a headache and spent time with Fong Beibei every day to find a good kindergarten. It was not that there were no recommendations. After Poplar Fruit told the teachers that he wanted to find a kindergarten for Kiki, there were immediately a lot of mothers and teachers who enthusiastically ran over to give Poplar Fruit a list. They even patted their chests and said that they could help Poplar Fruit find a kindergarten. However, the choices that these teachers gave were somewhat passable. Even the aristocratic kindergartens and bilingual kindergartens were very Chinese. The flyers emphasized a little too much on result. Poplar Fruit did not like it very much. Fortunately, Song Jiwen's father, Poplar Fruit's godfather, Song Chunfang, was more well informed. He found a completely Western-style kindergarten for Poplar Fruit, Huadeifu Kindergarten. Coincidentally, Huadeifu Kindergarten was not very far from Poplar Fruit's house. In fact, Huadeifu Kindergarten in Guangzhou was one of the branches of a very famous private kindergarten chain in the United States. However, it seemed that this kindergarten's enrollment in China was mainly for the children of foreign executives working in China. Because of the positioning, many Chinese parents looked down on Huadeifu Kindergarten. However, Poplar Fruit was more interested because they did not say that they changed their original model because of localization. They only integrated some traditional Chinese culture content because of the local materials. For example, they would recruit some kindergarten teachers who knew how to write with a brush, draw with a brush, understood traditional Chinese culture, and could adapt to the Western teaching model. However, although the locals did not think highly of Huadeifu Kindergarten, not just anyone could casually put their child into it. Any child who wanted to enter the kindergarten would have to go through a small interview, just like the kindergartens in the United States. In order to register Kiki, Poplar Fruit brought Kiki to the interview. At first, Kiki was a little timid when facing the blonde, blue-eyed granny who spoke fluent Chinese. Poplar Fruit thought that there was no hope for her. Your daughter's divergent thinking is quite good. Although she's still a little nervous when answering questions, it's okay. We don't expect a child to face the interview calmly like an adult. The principal commented to Poplar Fruit behind them. On the contrary, during the interview, the principal often encouraged Kiki with a smile to ease her nervous mood. The principal's criticism of the current situation of China was merciless. She said to Poplar Fruit, "When the child answered my questions, she did not give a very standard answer. What I mean is that she did not prepare the answers in advance. This is good because authenticity and naivety are very important to a child. We adults should not take away a child's nature." So she passed the interview? Poplar Fruit asked happily. Of course. The principal smiled and lowered her body. She looked at Kiki, who was hugging her father's thigh, and said, "Welcome, little angel, to Huadeifu's big family." Kiki smiled shyly and sweetly, just like how Poplar Fruit felt at that moment. The tuition was not cheap. A semester would cost more than 100,000 yuan. After a year, he could go to Hong Kong to study abroad. Of course, money was not a problem for Poplar Fruit now. He could finally breathe a sigh of relief. Kiki would be settled for the next semester. Chapter 1106. Time flew by, and a month had passed in the blink of an eye. In the past June and July, after the NBA and the World Cup were over, Beckham called young Guo from afar and exclaimed, "Why are you so godly, kid?" You guessed it right. However, this was not important. What was important was that Poplar Fruit had graduated. That's right, he had become the first student in Higoshiyama University's history to complete a doctorate in just 2 years. At Poplar Fruit's graduation ceremony, many important professors attended, suppressing the last few weak voices of doubt. There were well-known professors in the foreign language field, such as Professor Yuan Chenghe from the University of Guangdong and Professor Luo Lin from the University of Beijing. They were all old acquaintances of Poplar Fruit. They had met many times, whether in academic cooperation or academic exchange. There were also national treasured scholars in the field of Chinese literature, such as Professor Yuan Xinlin from Beijing University and Professor Liu Shufeng from Shuremu University. Any one of them could not be ignored, even on a national scale. With them expressing such confidence in Poplar Fruit, who would be willing to raise doubts? Didn't you see that such a large group of people had appeared at the graduation ceremony of the School of Foreign Languages? All the famous leaders of Higoshiyama University were present. In fact, they did not just rush over to support Poplar Fruit. In the words of the ancients, everyone knows what Sima Zhao is thinking. In the words of Chen Zongdai, they were jealous, it's better not to come. Yes, people like Yuan Chenghe and Luo Lin had contacted Poplar Fruit several times before the graduation ceremony, trying to invite Poplar Fruit to teach at their university. Luo Lin was fine with it, but Yuan Chenghe had directly promised to be an associate professor. Wasn't this a blatant attempt to poach someone? People like Yuan Xinlin and Liu Shufeng still did not give up. They still wanted Poplar Fruit to continue studying for a doctorate in Chinese. In fact, Poplar Fruit had already received a new admission letter from Higoshiyama University. In the next 2 years, Poplar Fruit would stay at Higoshiyama University, just like before, to study for a doctorate in Chinese. With Poplar Fruit's personality, naturally, he would not leave Guangdong. There were not many double doctorates, but there seemed to be a few. Poplar Fruit's doctorate in Chinese was not difficult at all. With his theory of word separation, if it was not for the domestic system's restraint, he would have been awarded a doctorate. Of course, Yang Guo's human relations were still in the foreign languages school, and she was only a university lecturer. But according to Chen Zongdai's plan, Poplar Fruit should be promoted to associate professor next year. If he continued to publish academic works, maybe Poplar Fruit could be promoted to professor at the age of 30. Therefore, Poplar Fruit's graduation ceremony was not too sad. This graduation was not the end, but a new beginning. Next semester, it would be the beginning of a new semester, right? If June was the harvest season, then July was the busy season. A year of remote teaching had brought obvious changes to the poor mountainous students in Liang City. More than 500 sixth-grade students passed the entrance exam, and the enrollment rate jumped from the previous 3% to 23%. And the results of the Xiong family's children who had received 2 years of remote education were even more eye-catching. Their enrollment rate had reached 81%. One must know that in the past, the Xiong family did not necessarily have 2 or 3 students who could be admitted to the county's middle school. This year, more than 20 people were admitted to the middle school, and 16 of them were admitted to the key middle school. This included Xiong Xiaofeng, who had been at the bottom of the list for 10,000 years, but during the exam, he broke out with 200% of his standard. Although he was not admitted to the key middle school, he was still ranked 17th, which was worthy of celebration. It was also this report card that made the country and the Ministry of Education determined to popularize remote education. Yes, it was remote education, not remote teaching. The country decided to use 10 years as a transition period to use remote teaching to verify the effect of remote education. In the future, The education model in remote mountainous areas may gradually change from volunteer-led and state-supported remote teaching to state-led remote education with real employment system teachers. Perhaps, it could be popularized to the whole society, but this was a story for the future. Under the country's command, the 3 southwestern provinces began a large-scale rectification and upgrading of the poor mountainous areas' schools. This time, Poplar Fruit did not need to personally lead the team. Even Fat Dragon and CAI Simin only led their technical staff to disperse and act as on-site guides in each area. Tens of thousands of equipment and manpower went deep into the poor mountainous areas to carry out the transformation work in full swing. These infrastructure works did not require Poplar Fruit's intervention, and Poplar Fruit's charity fund did not need to invest money in the purchase of equipment. Since the country had made up its mind to do remote teaching, naturally, it would not be stingy to the point of not being willing to invest hundreds of millions of fund. Otherwise, if a country's education needed private money or charity funding, even if it was not shameful, the people would question where the taxes paid by the country every year were spent. Without needing to worry about infrastructure work, Poplar Fruit was still very busy. He was busy in 2 ways. One was to invite the outstanding students of each grade under the remote teaching training in Liang City this year. Up to 500 students from poor mountainous areas came to Yangcheng to see the world with their own eyes with the university volunteers. In the past, Poplar Fruit only wanted to invite 100 students, but since the charity fund was saved, he could invite more students. Poplar Fruit had always attached great importance to the development of this summer program. Since 2 years ago, when he was in Xiong village, he had already buried this idea in his heart. Why was it said that remote teaching could bring about earth-shaking changes to the children in the poor mountainous areas? That was because remote teaching could let them come into contact with a different level, science and technology. With the power of science and technology, they could see the outside world and obtain the same quality of education as the children in the city. But everything they saw through a small screen could not compare to the bustling world they saw with their own bright eyes. The latter brought about 1,000 times more impact and motivation to learn than the former. Poplar Fruit followed behind the group and said with emotion to Wang Yubor, "These children are still young. They are not like adults who can't straighten their backs because of life. In the face of the bustling world outside, they still have a lot of challenges and passion to explore." Other than taking care of the 500 children, Poplar Fruit's other important task was to lead the core members of the remote teaching group in Yangcheng to communicate with the representatives of the student unions of the 100 or so key universities in the country. Because there were a lot of people, up to 300 people, they were divided into 3 groups. The time span was also more than 3 weeks. The scale of this was comparable to a national student union meeting, but the meaning was completely different. Because these selected representatives would be the founding members of the remote teaching group set up by the major universities in the future. There was no need to elaborate on the content. After all, it was a bit political. As the saying went, the general is brave, and the army is willing to sacrifice their lives. These people from the student union seriously recorded the experience that Poplar Fruit imparted to them. Perhaps the starting point of these people's efforts in the future would be fundamentally different from Poplar Fruit's, but Poplar Fruit would not dwell on this problem. Black cat, white cat, a cat that catches mice is a good cat. As long as it can benefit the children in the mountainous areas, isn't that enough? You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.